Chapter 3805. His leg, which should have reacted to her knock, didn't react at all. It was still straight. Seeing this scene, her heart sank. She tried the other side, but it was still the same, there was no reaction at all. Seeing her face change slightly and become serious, his heart was unwilling to part with her. He comforted her, "Fengjiu, don't worry. Maybe you'll recover after a while." Fengjiu did not give up and pressed the acupuncture point between his legs, but there was still no reaction. She looked up at him. "When I checked your body had already recovered and the blood between your legs was flowing. I didn't think that." Her voice paused and she did not continue. Her heart was filled with self-blame. Xianyuan Mose reached out to hold her hand. His low and hoarse voice was filled with indifference. "You don't need to blame yourself. It's already very good that I can wake up. It's just a pair of legs. Even if I can't walk, I can still accompany you. I'll cure you." She looked at him and her eyes were filled with determination. "I'll definitely cure you. I believe in you." Xianyuan Mose smiled and rubbed her hair. He reached out and pulled her into his embrace with a satisfied smile on his face. "Jiu, being able to wake up and see you again, I'm already very happy. I'm really afraid that if I continue to sleep, I'll miss the chance to give birth to the next generation for me. I'll miss our child's growth, I'll miss everything. But now, it's not too late. I'm already very satisfied and very happy." Hearing his words, Fengjiu's mood gradually eased. She reached out and hugged him as her lips revealed a smile. "You're right. As long as you're by our side, it's enough." As long as she was given time, she would definitely be able to make him stand up again. Because Xianyuan Mose had been in a deep sleep for several months, Fengjiu told him everything that had happened during this period of time. Then, she told him to rest and recuperate. She would let him out when they returned to the small house in the center of the lake. After all, other than the people around her who knew that she had brought Mose into her space, no one else knew. If he suddenly appeared in front of everyone, they would not be able to explain why he suddenly appeared. At that time, once the fact that she possessed an artifact was exposed, it would only add to her troubles and dangers. Outside, she said to Qin Xian, "Go and call Hui Lang and Du Fan over." "Yes." Qin Xian responded and turned to tell them to board the spaceship. Not long after, everyone gathered around the spaceship. Fengjiu glanced at Jin Feng and the others who were resting not far away from the spaceship. He stretched out his hand and set up a soundproof barrier. Then, he said to them, "I have two news for you. One is good news, and the other is bad news." When everyone heard this, they could not help exchanging glances. Hui Lang looked at her and asked, "Madam, is the good news that Master has woken up?" Fengjiu glanced at him and nodded. "That's right. Mose has already woken up. When we return to the city, his body should have recovered." As soon as she finished speaking, everyone could not help but reveal a joyful smile. "That's great. The bad news is that there's something wrong with his legs. He can't stand up," Fengjiu said, pursing her lips and frowning slightly. Chapter 3806. Hui Lang. Du Fan shouted and reached out to catch him. If Yama Lord really could not stand up, the person who would be most worried would be his master. Hui Lang seemed to have realized that his words were inappropriate. He pursed his lips and said, "Madam, I am just worried about Master." "I know." Fengjiu said, "Back then, in order to save his life and protect his heart, I sealed the energy of the Black Lotus in his lower body. It is probably because of this that he lost feeling in his legs. However, I will use all means to cure him." Her voice went from light to heavy, especially the last sentence, which showed her determination. "I am telling you all this so that you can be mentally prepared." She looked at them and said, "All right, go and rest. We will set off tomorrow morning and speed up the return journey." "Yes." Everyone replied and watched as she removed the soundproof enchantment and turned to walk towards the cabin. The return journey was as smooth and peaceful as the journey they had come. After about 10 days of travel, they arrived at the mountain path outside her city. When they arrived, Fengjiu kept the flying ship and sat in the carriage that came to pick her up after receiving the news. "Commander Jean, thank you for taking care of us on this journey. If there is a chance in the future, we will work together again." In the carriage, Fengjiu lifted the curtain and looked at Jin Yifeng and the 20 mercenaries behind him and smiled. Hearing this, Jin Yifeng hurriedly cupped his hands and said, "It was all thanks to Madame Xianyuan and everyone else that my 20 brothers were able to return safely. In the future, if Madame needs us for anything, please don't hesitate to ask. This Jean will definitely not refuse." The corners of Fengjiu's lips curled up slightly as she replied, "All right." She then lowered the curtain. As the carriage slowly moved forward, Du Fan, who was at the side, looked at Jin Yifeng and the mercenaries. He smiled and said, "Captain Jean, I will have someone send the rest of the commission to you later. Please." He raised his hand and saluted, then followed the carriage and left. Jin Yifeng did not even have time to speak before seeing them leave. Seeing them enter the city first, he then turned to the mercenaries behind him and said, "When you go back, remember not to mention anything related to them to anyone, not even the other mercenaries in our group." He paused and said in a low and dignified voice, "Keep your mouth shut. This is not only for your own good, but also for the other brothers. Do you understand?" "Understood. Don't worry, Commander." The 20 mercenaries replied in unison and made a mental note. If it was in the past, they would more or less use it as a joke to show off. However, this time, Madame Xianyuan and the others were so powerful that they did not dare to be impudent in the slightest. Especially after personally witnessing the way they treated some people, they did not dare to act rashly. "It's good that you understand. Let's go. Let's go back too. Tonight, we'll call the other brothers to have a good drink and a big meal." Jin Yifeng said with a smile and led them into the city. Chapter 3807. When she saw this, she smiled and went forward to take a look at the wheelchair. Then, she walked into the room and brought Xianyuan Mose out of her space. After recuperating, his complexion had recovered, and he looked very energetic. The only thing was that he could not feel his legs. Fengjiu looked at him and said, "Mose, let me help you bathe." She said with a smile. Then, she went outside and ordered the Ling Shuang, who was waiting outside, to prepare water for the bath. Xianyuan Mose looked at her and said, "You're pregnant now. How can you do this? Get someone to prepare the water, and I'll do it myself." "No, it's not convenient for you to do it yourself," Fengjiu said. Xianyuan Mose smiled and said, "I can't feel my legs, not my hands. Don't worry. I can do it myself." It was just that his legs could not walk. He could still bathe by himself. When she saw this, Fengjiu thought about it and said, "Then I'll help you scrub your back. Don't worry. It won't hurt the child." In the end, Xianyuan Mose agreed to let her stay and help him scrub his back. When the water in the bathtub was ready, Fengjiu helped him into the wheelchair and pushed him behind the screen. When they arrived at the bathtub, Xianyuan Mose took off his clothes. When he took off his pants, he could not stand up. It was inconvenient. When Fengjiu saw this, she said, "Let me help you." He turned his head and looked at her with a smile as she walked forward. Then, he supported himself with both hands on the sides of the wheelchair. She went forward and bent down to help him take off his pants. After all, he was a young and vigorous man who had been in a coma for a few months. It would have been one thing if he had not had sex in the past, but those who had had sex did not get close to women. Now that the person he loved was in front of him, and she was helping him do such an intimate thing, his heartbeat suddenly became chaotic. There was a faint impulse in his lower abdomen. His body's instinctive reaction made him feel a little awkward at this moment. Episdoe was still pregnant, and his legs could not stand up. However, once she got close to him, he actually became so impulsive. He really should not have done so. He tried to suppress the heat in his lower abdomen, but when his pants were taken off and he sat naked in front of her, the impulse that he tried so hard to suppress rose up again. His body's instinctive reaction and her surprised gaze made him a little uncomfortable. Ahem, Episdoe, you can go out. I can do it myself. As he spoke, he slapped the wheelchair with both hands, and his entire body flew into the bathtub. The water overflowed as he entered, splashing all over the floor. Episdoe didn't dodge, and the corner of her skirt was slightly splashed with water. She walked forward and looked at the awkward and arrogant man, and couldn't help but smile. I say, have you forgotten who I am to you? She walked in front of him and raised her eyebrows as she looked at him calmly. Xianyuan Mose was stunned. His deep gaze met her smiling eyes, and his deep voice was magnetic as he said, "You are my wife, and my Episdoe." Episdoe nodded and said, "It's good that you know." As she spoke, her smiling gaze fell on him. She stood in front of him and reached out to untie her belt and take off her coat. Her hands did not stop when the clothes fell to the ground. Instead, she took them off one by one. "Episdoe, what are you doing?" Chapter 3808. Episdoe smiled charmingly when she heard this, and her beautiful eyes carried a wisp of seductive charm. "Could it be that you can't tell what I want to do?" Xianyuan Mose's heart skipped a beat. Her voice was gentle and flirtatious, with a hint of seduction. His eyes gradually darkened. He didn't look away again. He just looked at her body that had become full because of her pregnancy. His eyes were burning like flames. He watched as she took off her clothes one by one. She stood naked in front of him. Her snow-white skin was like jade with a gentle luster. Her beautiful figure was as seductive as when she had just gotten married. The only difference was that now she was pregnant with a child. Her twin peaks were fuller, her belly was bulging, and her hips were perky. The mature charm she exuded was even more seductive. Episdoe stepped on a small chair and stepped into the bathtub. Her body sank and she sat directly on his legs. The water overflowed from the tub. She leaned forward and leaned close to his body. "Zay, touch it." She took his hand and placed it on her stomach. Xianyuan Mose lowered his head slightly and looked at her bulging belly in the water. Their hands overlapped and gently pressed against her belly, letting him feel the light kick through her thin belly. "Aya, you kicked me," Episdoe whispered. Looking at his nervous expression, she immediately smiled. "Recently, the fetal movement has been more serious. From time to time, it would kick me." Xianyuan Mose was startled by the kick. His hand instinctively shrank back and his expression became nervous. After hearing her words, he frowned and asked, "Does it kick you often?" "The fetal movement is normal. It's just a light kick. It's not a problem." She chuckled and looked at him. "Let me help you wipe your back. Otherwise, the water will turn cold." Hearing this, Xianyuan Mose recovered. He looked at her with dark eyes and said in a hoarse voice, "Okay." In the bathtub, after Episdoe helped him wipe his back, she looked at him and smiled. Her slender white hand gently lifted his chin and leaned over to kiss his lips. Her hand slowly moved down his chest. The next day, the two people sleeping on the bed looked gentle and relaxed. In the quiet morning, Xianyuan Mose opened his eyes and looked at Episdoe in his arms. He couldn't help but reveal a doting smile. One of his hands was used as a pillow by her, and the other hand was originally on her waist. At this moment, he gently lifted it and pushed a strand of hair that fell on her face behind her ear. Perhaps this subtle movement woke her up. She rubbed in his arms and didn't open her eyes. She just murmured, "Sleep a little more." Hearing her murmur, Xianyuan Mose couldn't help but smile. He accompanied her to sleep here. It wasn't until close to noon that she lazily opened her eyes in his arms. Awake? A low voice entered her ears. Fengjiu's face also bloomed with a smile. Awake. She reached out to hug him and said, I'll take you to walk around this small house in the middle of the lake. It's quite big inside, and the scenery is good. Okay. Xianyuan Mose responded and let her get up first. Chapter 3809. I'm fine, there's no need to press. As he spoke, he propped himself up with one hand on the bed. His legs were numb, so it was somewhat inconvenient for him. Thus, he moved to the side of the bed and began to put on his clothes. After Fengjiu got out of bed, she put on her clothes and came over to help him put on his clothes. Then she said, I'll go wash up first. I'll get some water for you later. Xianyuan Mose took her hand and said, Jiu, just let the servants do it. You're pregnant, so you shouldn't do everything yourself. These things aren't that big of a deal. Moreover, it's good to move around more. She pursed her lips and smiled, saying, I just came back today, so I'll sleep a little later. From tomorrow onwards, you have to accompany me around the Fu more. Hearing this, Xianyuan Mose said, all right, but things like getting water and washing up can be done by the servants. Don't tire yourself out. Unable to persuade him, Fengjiu finally compromised and said, all right. Then I'll go wash up. I'll get Ling Shuang to bring water in. As she spoke, she called outside. The people in the Fu had been waiting for the two of them to appear since early in the morning, but they didn't see them the entire morning. It wasn't until noon that they heard the sounds of them waking up. In the Fu's garden, Du Fan, Hui Lang, and the others were sitting in the pavilion drinking tea and chatting. When they heard that the two masters had woken up, they couldn't sit still. Let's go over now. Master and Madam should have already washed up. Hui Lang said. He hadn't seen his master for a long time and really wanted to see him. Du Fan smiled and fanned the fan in his hand, saying, let's go. It's a joyous occasion that the Yama Lord has awakened. We have to celebrate tonight. I'll book a banquet later and call Qi Kong back for a gathering. Luo Yu smiled and said, I sent him a message early in the morning. I reckon he'll be here as soon as he finishes his work. Oh right, the assassination organization that ambushed you on the way last time has been dealt with. Not a single one of them is left. However, this movement accidentally caused too much of a commotion. Now, the outside world is discussing who it was that uprooted that organization, and we have also released the news. Now, the name of Yan Jian can be said to be well known here. They talked as they walked. When they arrived at the courtyard, they saw that the two masters were already eating in the courtyard. Without waiting for Du Fan and the others to speak, Hui Lang had already rushed forward and looked at Xianyuan Mose with joy. Master, you're finally awake. Xianyuan Mose nodded slightly and glanced at Hui Lang. Master, Yama Lord. Du Fan and the others stepped forward and bowed to them. All of you are here. Have you had breakfast? Fengjiu asked. We've all eaten, Master. Everyone replied. Since you've all eaten, go back and tell Mose about all the things you're doing. Fengjiu instructed them to go back and tell Xianyuan Mose about all the forces in their hands and the things they were in charge of, so that he could familiarize himself with all the forces they controlled here. Yes. Everyone replied in a low voice. On the other side, in the East City Lord's mansion, Qi Kong was staring at the old man in front of him with a dark expression. I've already said that we don't need the help of the people sent by the immortal sect. Go back to where you came from. Chapter 38:10. Hearing this, Qi Kang's face darkened. He glanced at him coldly and asked, Then let me ask you, does your sect master know that you were sent here? The sect master is in seclusion. Naturally, he doesn't know about this. The old man said slowly. Then what about your great elder? Qi Kong asked again. Great Elder went out and hasn't returned yet. The old man didn't even lift his eyelids. Hearing this, Chi Kong didn't ask anymore. He looked at the old man in front of him and said in a deep voice, "Guards. Get him out of here right now. Don't let him step into the East City Lord Mansion." As soon as his voice rang out, the 4 black-clothed guards in the dark quickly flashed out and surrounded the old man. They stepped forward to seize the old man, but who would have thought that the old man would actually move and avoid their hands? "East City Lord, are you going to use force on me?" The old man looked at Chi Kong and asked. Chi Kang's face darkened. He said, "I'm asking you to leave. I've already made it very clear to you that I don't need a steward from your sect here. East City Lord, you should think carefully. If you chase me out like this, you're disrespecting the people of the immortal sect. You don't care about the etiquette of the immortal sect. Have you thought about the consequences of this?" The old man's voice was low and his eyes were filled with displeasure. Obviously, he was very displeased with his lack of understanding. When Chi Kong heard this, the corners of his mouth twitched. "It must be one of the peak masters who asked you to come here, right?" His voice paused, and he took a step forward with his hands clasped behind his back. His robust body seemed to contain endless power. He stood in front of the old man, and with a somewhat condescending aura, he said, "You've lived for so long. Why don't you think about it? Why didn't your sect leader give the order? Why did your great elder go back early? Also, why am I qualified to be the East City Lord?" With every sentence, he took a step forward. Step by step, he forced the old man to step back. He didn't think about it before, but at this moment, he was terrified. Beads of sweat appeared on his forehead and his heart was in a mess. He was indeed here on the orders of the Peak Master. Now that he heard what the Peak Master said, he was secretly shocked. "Take him away." Chi Kong flicked his sleeve and shouted. Several black-clothed men were about to step forward, but at this moment, the old man flicked his sleeve and shouted, "I can walk on my own." With that said, he turned around and walked out. After being pestered for the whole morning, Chi Kong finally saw him leave. He secretly breathed a sigh of relief. After handing over the matters of the City Lord's mansion, he prepared to leave. East City Lord, Chi Kong. As soon as he stepped out of the city gates, a thunderous voice rang out. Chi Kong, who had already stepped out of the gates, frowned when he heard the voice. He looked around but saw nothing. "Who's there?" Chi Kong shouted. He saw a group of black-clothed men holding swords come out and attack him. After the group of black-clothed men attacked with swords, 3 people of different ages and wearing strange clothes came out from the dark. They were staring at Chi Kong, who was not far in front of them. The auras of the 3 people were extremely powerful. It was as if they had merged into one with the space. It was extremely difficult to find them. Moreover, if they hadn't come out on their own, he was afraid that even if he released his divine sense, he wouldn't have been able to find them. Chapter 38:11. Dozens of men in black appeared in front of the governor's mansion and surrounded Chi Kong. The guards in the governor's mansion quickly rushed out. However, after seeing the scene outside, no one dared to approach. The sword formation formed by the dozens of men in black trapped Chi Kong tightly like a spider's web, not giving him a chance to retreat. Trapped in the sword formation, if he was careless, he would be injured by the sword chi. In serious cases, he would even be cut in half at the waist. The sword formation surged with an extremely powerful aura. Just the aura of pressure that permeated the surroundings was enough to make the guards not dare to step forward to help. With such strength, if they stepped forward, they would probably only end up dead. Whoosh! Whoosh whoosh whoosh! The sharp airflow whistled past. Within the sword formation, Chi Kong avoided the blades in the sword formation while looking for a way to break the formation. After about half an hour, he found a way to break the formation. When he struck down with his sword, one of the men in black flew out with a bang. The sword formation instantly scattered and disappeared without a trace. The men in black were repelled by the powerful airflow. One by one, they staggered back a few steps and stared at Qi Kong vigilantly. Qi Kong did not attack them again. Instead, he stared at the three men in front. He saw that the two men on his left and right looked to be in their 40s or 50s, while the one in the middle was an old man. The old man held a black walking stick in his hand. He looked inconspicuous, but among the three men, the old man's aura was the most threatening. Kill him. The old man squinted his eyes and touched the walking stick in his hand. It was as if he was not the one who gave the order to kill. Dozens of men in black surrounded and attacked. Qi Kong frowned. He felt that this would take a lot of time. Thus, he turned his palm and a flying sword instantly appeared in his hand. A powerful spiritual aura surged from his body and entered the sharp sword in his hand. The sharp sword in his hand quickly emitted a spiritual aura that could be seen with the naked eye. At the tip of the sword, the whistling sword aura swam. In the next moment, the long sword in his hand flew out and placed in front of him. At the same time, the killing intent and pressure contained in his body also burst out at this moment. You dare to find trouble with me? Die! Swish! Qi Kong bellowed angrily. Immediately after, the soaring sword slashed down fiercely. The sword chi that was visible to the naked eye formed a huge sword chi that rushed out with a swoosh. It attacked the men in black at a speed that was too fast for the ears to cover. Swish! Ah! Hiss! Ah! Sharp sounds of air currents and screams rang out. The thick smell of blood permeated the air in the next moment. Corpses fell in front of the gates of the city lord's mansion. Blood dyed the ground red, and the citizens watching from afar gasped in shock. Looking at this scene, the three people who had been watching from a distance narrowed their eyes. A sinister look flashed across their vicious eyes. The three of them stood in three different corners, as if they wanted to kill him. Therefore, they did not give him the slightest chance to escape their sight. The sword in Qi Kang's hand was pointed diagonally at the ground, and the aura of spiritual power surged on the blade. He looked at the three people in front of him and asked, "Who are you? Who instigated you to kill me? The dead don't need to know." The old man said, his murky and vicious gaze fixed on Qi Kong. Chapter 38:12. The pressure that was visible to the naked eye suddenly burst out and formed a powerful airflow that bounced the two people away. It happened so fast that they could not react in time. Ah! The two cultivators screamed as their bodies were bounced back by the airflow. At the same time, the blood in their bodies gushed out from their throats. Pft! Bang, bang! Two figures landed heavily on the ground more than 10 meters away. With just one blow, their faces instantly turned pale. Their bodies were trembling, and blood was still flowing out of their mouths. They couldn't stand up for a while. A high god! You were hiding your strength. The old man widened his eyes in shock and disbelief. Judging by the powerful pressure that surged out of his body, it was clearly the aura of a high god. Previously, the strength he had displayed was only at the low god stage. He had never imagined that Qi Kang's strength would actually be so powerful. In the entire flying immortal city, only a few people in the immortal sect could be compared to a high deity expert. Qi Kang's face was dignified. He flicked his sleeves and put one hand behind his back. The pressure that surged out of his body was instantly withdrawn. He stood with his hands behind his back, glanced sharply at the old man, and shouted in a deep voice, "Capture them." Yes. The city guards behind him quickly stepped forward and detained the two cultivators who could not stand up. The old man saw that the situation was not right and immediately wanted to escape. However, as soon as he moved, Qi Kang's figure moved as well. "Since you're here, don't think about leaving. As soon as his voice fell, his figure quickly swept out and his hand formed a claw to attack the old man. His speed was so fast that only a shadow could be seen flashing by. It was impossible to see his movement technique. The pressure of a high god enveloped the old man as his figure swept out. The powerful pressure was like a mountain that pressed down on the old man, making him unable to move even half a step. Because he couldn't move his body, his strength was suppressed by Qi Kang's pressure. Seeing that Qi Kang was about to grab him, the old man's eyes flashed with a trace of ruthlessness and determination. He quickly activated his own spiritual aura, not to escape, but to detonate the inner core in his body and perish together with Qi Kang. Just as Qi Kang was about to grab him, he sensed that something was wrong with his opponent's aura. His expression changed and he shouted, "Everyone get out of the way! Get out of my way!" A voice filled with pressure and spirit force entered the ears of the surrounding people. Perhaps it was because of the pressure, the surrounding people instinctively retreated after hearing his shout. Just as Qi Kang couldn't stop his hand gesture and could only roll in the air to avoid it, the old man raised his head and laughed heartily. Then, a loud explosion was heard. Bang! A powerful airflow erupted from the old man's body, like a landmine exploding, causing dust and mud to splatter. The airflow that splashed out whooshed towards the surroundings, causing many people to be injured by the airflow as they were unable to dodge in time. Chapter 38:13. Qi Kang frowned and looked around. He saw that many people had been injured by the flying rocks and air currents. Their heads were bleeding and they were wailing on the ground. Hence, he ordered in a deep voice, "Send the injured people to the medical hall for treatment and bandaging." Yes. The city guard replied and sent a group of people to bring the injured people to the nearest medical hall. Clean up the ground and find out where they came from. He glanced around and looked at a middle-aged man beside him. "Lock up the two of them and wait for me to come back and interrogate them." Yes. The middle-aged man replied. He did not dare to delay and quickly detained the two people. However, at this moment, the city guard's exclamation was heard. "Governor, it's not good. They're dead." The middle-aged man was shocked. He instinctively glanced at Qi Kang and quickly went to check on the two cultivators who had been put on the ground. Not long after, he quickly came to Qi Kang's side. "Governor, the two of them bit the poison pills hidden in their mouths. They're dead." He lowered his head and did not dare to look at him. This person died before he could interrogate them. In the end, it was his negligence. Qi Kang frowned and glanced at the two corpses. He did not expect that the two of them would choose to bite the poison pills and commit suicide after seeing the old man explode himself. However, who would want to kill him? Because of this episode, he wanted to go out and meet his master, but he turned back to the governor's mansion. It was not until evening that he left the governor's mansion through the back door and went to the small house in the middle of the lake. The scene that happened in front of the East City governor's mansion today had quietly spread. Although they did not know who the people who dared to go to the East City governor's mansion were. However, after this incident, the various forces in the city and the other three governors' manors knew that Qi Kang's strength was already at the level of a great deity. In a family, the head of the family who heard the news was having a discussion with a few managers in the family. "I heard from the people nearby that the East City Lord, Qi Kang, emitted an aura that was at the peak of the high god level. Since the last City Lord election, many people have been inquiring about his background, but there is still no news. Head of the family, in our city, only the patriarchs of a few families have the strength of a great deity. Otherwise, only the high-level experts in the celestial sect are qualified to be mentioned in the same breath as him. There are pros and cons for such a powerful person to become the East City governor." Hearing this, another person asked, "What's the pros and cons?" The person who spoke glanced at that person and continued, "The strength of the Eastern City Lord of the Flying Immortal City is so powerful, the other forces naturally wouldn't dare to act rashly in the Flying Immortal City. This is a good thing, but the bad thing is, I'm worried that after he has been in a high position for a long time, his strength will be the strongest among the 4 city lords. Chapter 38:14. Such a character, what kind of family does he come from? Why can't we find any information about him? An old man frowned and stroked his beard as he pondered. It's impossible for an outstanding character to be unknown, let alone such a character. Especially this Dongfang city lord's temperament is not something an ordinary person can compare to. From this, it can be seen that he must be a famous character. The middle-aged man sitting next to him said, "But it's true. Not only did the people we sent not find any information about Dongfang city lord Qi Kong, even the people from other forces were the same. No one has any information about him. It's as if he appeared out of thin air." Appeared out of thin air. The old man stroked his beard and shook his head. No, it's impossible for a person to appear out of thin air. It's just that his origin is mysterious and we can't find anything about him. But, what kind of origin could it be that we can't find anything about him? Unless. The head of the family hesitantly opened his mouth, but didn't say it out loud. There was only uncertainty in his eyes. Everyone in the hall looked at the pondering family head. Seeing that he didn't have any intention to speak, they couldn't help but look at each other. One of them asked, "Family head, unless what?" The family head looked at them and paused for a moment before saying, "Unless, he's not from our continent." As soon as these words came out, everyone was stunned. A middle-aged man said in surprise, "Not from our continent? How is that possible? If he's here, then he must be from our continent. Maybe he's from some mysterious family." Speaking of the word mysterious, it reminds me of the people on the bounty list a few months ago. A middle-aged man said thoughtfully. Another person looked at him and said, "Aren't those people on the bounty list the ones who killed the immortal sect's peak master and crippled their disciples? It said that they later destroyed several families that put them on the bounty list." This matter was so big that even the people on the bounty list didn't dare to accept any bounties on them. It's because of this that other than some people who have seen the portraits on the bounty list, no one knows what they look like or where they come from. As soon as these words were spoken, everyone in the hall fell silent. No one spoke, as if they were thinking. There's only one East City Lord. He shouldn't be related to those people, right? Another middle-aged man said, "Besides, when the city lord was chosen that day, the people of the immortal sect were all watching from the stage. If it really was East City Lord Qi Kong, how could he?" At this point, he suddenly stopped talking, as if he had thought of something. He opened his mouth, but no sound came out. Everyone in the hall seemed to think of something. They glanced at each other and thought back to when the immortal sect's Duan Yunhe saw Qi Kong. He was so shocked that he smashed his teacup. After a long time, the head of the family took a deep breath and said, "Let's leave it at that. It's good that you know. Don't tell anyone about this, lest you get into trouble." Everyone stood up with a solemn expression and replied solemnly, "Yes, we understand." Chapter 38:15. Master, speaking of which, our Lin family hasn't paid a visit to the East City Lord's mansion yet, right? The old man looked at the master and asked, "Should we find a time to pay a visit?" The master nodded, "Yes, I'll arrange it. I won't go these 2 days, so as not to make it seem too deliberate. Let's stay for a few days. I'll go to the East City Lord's mansion for a while." Hearing this, everyone secretly breathed a sigh of relief. After discussing some matters with the patriarch for a while, they all left. On the other side, Qi Kong, who they were talking about, was passing by other courtyards alone and came to the small house in the middle of the lake. It was already dark, and he was wearing a navy blue robe, so he was not conspicuous in the night. He turned and went into the small house in the middle of the lake, and heard Du Fan's voice with a smile. "City Lord Qi, you're finally here. The others are all here, and we're waiting for you." Du Fan smiled and walked towards him, still holding his fan in his hand. Qi Kong looked at Du Fan and said, "You're too free, aren't you? That's why you're so free. If you're too free, you can go to the East City Lord's mansion and help me do something." "Ha ha ha, that won't do. I have to stay by your side and watch over you. Occasionally, when you want to eat something, I can run errands or something." He smiled and waved the fan in his hand gently. He came to Qi Kang's side and put one hand on his shoulder, saying, "Let's go. Tonight, we've prepared good wine and dishes to celebrate. But I heard that someone went to ambush you. And went to the East City Lord's mansion. Yes, it doesn't seem like people from this city. They should be from other places. They're all dead before we find out who sent them," Qi Kong said and followed him inside. "Could it be someone sent by the previous city lord? After all, you've just taken over the city lord's mansion, so you shouldn't have the chance to offend anyone." Du Fan smiled. He was not worried that Yi Futian would be injured. In his opinion, Yi Futian was the strongest among the 8 captains of the Phoenix Guard. Unless Yi Futian wanted to be injured, who could fight against him? Qi Kang's lips curled into a smile, but he didn't say much. He only asked, "Where's Master?" "Oh, the Yama Lord is awake. Although he can't walk now, Master has been taking care of him. They should be in the courtyard right now." Qi Kong nodded and said, "You go first. I'll go to my master and the Yama Lord, and I'll go with them to the front yard." "All right, then hurry up. Remember to call Master and the Yama Lord over." Du Fan patted him on the shoulder and said, before walking away. At the front, Hui Lang, Luo Yu, and the others were gathered there. Several tables were filled with food, wine, and fruits. In front of each of them, there was a short table for them to put their things. "Du Fan, didn't you go to pick up Qi Kong? Why are you back? Where's Qi Kong?" Seeing him come back alone, Luo Yu raised his voice and asked. "He went to Master's place. He'll be here in a while." Du Fan answered. He walked to a small chair at the side and sat down. He poured himself a glass of wine and drank. News came from outside today that the East City Lord was ambushed. "Is he okay?" Bai Qingqing asked worriedly. Chapter 38:16. While they were chatting, Qi Kong went to the main courtyard. After meeting Xianyuan Mose and Fengjiu, he told them about the current situation in the East City Lord's mansion, as well as the information he had found after taking over. "Master, during this time, I've read the archives in the East City Lord's mansion and found some clues about the ancient Golden Lotus. But I'm not sure yet." Hearing Qi Kang's words, Fengjiu was surprised. "There's news about the ancient Golden Lotus? Master, please have a look." Qi Kong took out a shabby book and handed it to Fengjiu. "I saw it in this continent records. It's recorded on page 135 that 100 years ago, the light of the Golden Lotus appeared in the myriad Buddha's sect and shone on the earth. The trees within 100 miles of the myriad Buddha's sect grew rapidly overnight, and hundreds of flowers bloomed." As Fengjiu listened, she flipped to the 135th page. Indeed, there was information about the ancient Golden Lotus. However, there were only a few words on it. Xianyuan Mose, who was sitting in a wheelchair, listened to their words and pondered for a while. Then he slowly said in a low voice, "The myriad Buddha's sect is not one of the 4 sects, but a Buddhist sect that is above all the sects on this continent. It is said that this sect has not appeared for 100 years, and almost no one knows where it is." Fengjiu was slightly surprised. He looked sideways at him and asked curiously, "How do you know?" Xianyuan Mose smiled faintly. "I've been reading some books about this continent recently." Because he could not walk, he sat all day and did not have to deal with other things, so he found a lot of ancient books to read. It was because of this that he knew something about the myriad Buddha's sect. Hearing this, Fengjiu pursed his lips and smiled. "I don't know anything about the myriad Buddha's sect. I've only heard of the 4 Immortals sect before." Only when Chi Kong told me today did I know that the myriad Buddha's sect is above all the sects on this continent. Master, I'll investigate this matter. When I get the news and determine the location of the myriad Buddha's sect, I'll report it to you. Chi Kong looked at the two of them and said, they are all in the front yard. Master, do you want to go with the Yama Lord? Fengjiu handed the book back to him and said, you can keep this. Let's go. Let's go together. Therefore, Chi Kong came behind Xianyuan Mose and pushed the wheelchair, walking with them to the front yard. At the same time, the person who returned to the immortal sect arrived at Peak Master Sun's main peak. After having a disciple report to him, he stood outside and waited. Not long after, Peak Master Sun walked out with his hands behind his back. Looking at the old man standing there, he frowned and asked, didn't I tell you to go to the East City Lord's mansion? Why are you back? The old man stepped forward and said, Peak Master, Chi Kong of the East City Lord's mansion drove me out. He said that the people of our immortal sect should not interfere in the affairs of the East City Lord's mansion, so I came back first. Hearing this, Peak Master Sun's face darkened. Who is this Chi Kong? How dare he drive people of our immortal sect out? Isn't he afraid of offending our immortal sect? You're really arrogant once you reach the top. Chapter 38:17. Perhaps it was because Peak Master Sun could not bear to hear him speak so highly of Chi Kong. His face darkened as he glanced at him and said in a contemptuous tone, just a mere East City Lord, how is he not an ordinary person? Besides, he's only been in the position for a short time. He probably hasn't even warmed up to the position of the East City Lord yet. Peak Master, Chi Kong is a peak high god. The old man said with a serious face. He looked at Peak Master Sun, whose face had changed greatly because of his words. He sighed inwardly, no wonder the great elder came back early and didn't leave the people of the immortal sect at the East City Lord's mansion. He probably already knew about Chi Kang's true strength. What? A peak high god? How is that possible? Are you mistaken? Peak Master Sun's face changed and he looked at him in disbelief. How could a mere city lord of the East District be a pinnacle high god expert? I'm not mistaken. Not long after I was driven out today, a group of people he told him what happened in front of the gate of the East City Lord's mansion. In the end, he said, if it weren't for the two cultivators who were ruthless and killed him, they probably wouldn't have been able to force him to show his true strength. Many people saw it at that time. I think the news has already spread in the city. Hearing this, Peak Master Sun's face became serious. What is this Chi Kang's background? Where did he come from? He pondered and walked a few steps with his hands behind his back. Then he stopped and turned back to the old man. Go and listen. You must find out about him. The old man hesitated. He stood there and didn't answer. He didn't leave either. He just looked at Peak Master Sun with hesitation. What? Do you have something to say? If you have something to say, say it. Don't hesitate. Peak Master Sun said in a low voice. Peak Lord, I think it's best not to inquire about him anymore. You haven't come into contact with him, but after making a trip today and coming into contact with him, I feel that this person is very threatening. In front of him, I don't even dare to straighten my back and speak. The old man paused for a moment before continuing. When his sharp gaze swept over me, I felt as if my entire body was frozen in place. A wave of fear surged up from the soles of my feet straight to my heart. That kind of pressure, that kind of shock, he is not an ordinary person at all. I guess that his origin must be mysterious and extraordinary. Many forces and families have already been asking about him, but no one has any news about him. It was as if he had appeared out of thin air, no one knows where he came from. After hearing his words, Peak Lord's son fell silent. He didn't say anything for a long time. He just stared off into the distance, thinking about something. The old man didn't know whether to leave or stay. Looking at the silent young man, he could only lower his head and wait quietly at the side. After a long while, Peak Master Sun seemed to have regained his senses. He glanced at the old man and said, "That's enough. You may leave." "Yes." The old man responded, bowed, and turned to leave. Qi Kong. A Peak High God expert. Peak Master Sun murmured to himself. He wanted to meet this person. The night was getting darker. The dark and mysterious night sky was twinkling with stars. The white crescent moon hung in the night sky. It was so peaceful and gentle. Chapter 38:18. As the days went by, Fengjiu's belly grew bigger day by day. Especially when she was pregnant with twins, her belly was bigger than usual, which made her daily life more inconvenient. Especially when he saw how big her belly was, Xianyuan Mose was on tenterhooks every day as he pushed his wheelchair and followed her around. He was worried about this and that. It could be said that whenever Fengjiu wanted to do something herself, he would look nervous at the side, just like now. Fengjiu was sitting at the table in the courtyard, flipping through an ancient medicine book. An old yellow paper between the books fell to the ground because of her flipping. She glanced sideways and was about to bend down to pick it up, but Xianyuan Mose, who was sitting next to her, had already shouted nervously. "Don't move. Leng Shuang, pick it up." Xianyuan Mose saw that she still wanted to bend down with such a big belly, and couldn't help but break out in a cold sweat. He pushed the wheelchair to her side and held her hand with one hand to let her sit down. Fengjiu was stunned for a moment, and then laughed. "It's nothing. It's just picking up a piece of paper. It's nothing serious. Your belly is so big now. Let them do things like bending down to pick up things." Xianyuan Mose said with a straight face, but his eyes were full of worry. Ever since he had woken up, he had seen her belly grow bigger day by day, especially in the past month. When she was bathing, he had seen how thin her belly was, and he had been on tenterhooks. When he slept at night, he did not dare to touch her belly, for fear that his hand would press down on her belly. However, she was a restless person when she slept, which really gave him a headache. Okay, let Leng Shuang come and pick it up," Fengjiu said helplessly, sitting still. Leng Shuang picked up the things and handed them to her, and then quietly retreated to a corner. At the stairs in the courtyard, Qin Xian was also flipping through the medicine book. "You've been reading for the whole morning. Don't read for too long. I'll walk with you to the front yard." Xianyuan Mose closed the book in her hand. Hearing this, Fengjiu smiled. "Okay, I've been sitting for a long time. It's time to walk." She stood up and said, "I'll push you." "No, I can do it by myself. You can just follow me," Xianyuan Mose said, and put his hands on the mechanism of the wheelchair. He pressed it gently, and the wheelchair moved forward. Fengjiu looked at him, and walked beside him, and smiled. "This wheelchair is really good. It'll be more convenient for you to use." "Well, I'll get used to it," Xianyuan Mose replied. Hearing this, Fengjiu looked at him and said, "I'll cure your legs. You'll definitely be able to stand up again." Her voice was calm, but there was confidence in it. She was telling him that as long as she was given time, she would definitely find a way to cure his legs. It was not impossible, but something that she would definitely do. The two of them walked around the small house in the center of the lake. Leng Shuang and Qin Xian followed them unhurriedly about 10 steps behind. After walking around, Xianyuan Mose looked at Fengjiu, whose forehead was sweating a little, and said, "Are you tired? Let's sit over there." "Okay," Fengjiu replied. She gently supported her waist with one hand, walked to the stone table under the tree, and sat down to rest. Chapter 38:19. Hearing this, Xianyuan Mose couldn't help but look at her with pity. He wanted to say something, but he didn't know what to say. These days, she was pregnant and couldn't eat. She often got up in the middle of the night and sometimes couldn't sleep well. Her legs were slightly swollen. He saw all these, but he couldn't share the burden for her. He just quietly stayed by her side and watched her bear all this. He was secretly distressed. Qin Xian, go to the kitchen and bring the stewed soup. Xianyuan Mose turned to Qin Xian, who was not far away. Yes. Qin Xian responded and went to the kitchen. Stewed soup again. When Fengjiu heard this, he looked like he had nothing to live for. God knows that these days, he asked the kitchen staff to stew soup to nourish her body. Every day, she ate so much that she wanted to vomit. Now you eat 3 people's nourishment. You have to eat more nutritious things. Otherwise, your body is too weak. As Xianyuan Mose spoke, he gently caressed her stomach with one hand and felt the heartbeat of the 2 little lives in her stomach. When the palm of his hand touched her belly, the children in her belly kicked gently so that his palm felt their existence. He couldn't help shaking his head and laughing, it must be that bastard kicking you again. When he comes out in the future, I'll teach him a good lesson. Fengjiu didn't know whether to laugh or cry, that bastard is also your son. Besides, maybe it's my daughter who is kicking me. Daughters are generally more well-behaved. Only sons are more naughty. Xianyuan Mose said matter-of-factly. Seeing the matter-of-fact look on his face, Fengjiu couldn't help laughing. You will definitely spoil your daughter very much in the future. I just don't know who our 2 children will be like. Naturally, they will be like the 2 of us. Xianyuan Mose said. Fengjiu rolled his eyes, our children must be like the 2 of us. So I mean, will they look more like you? Or more like me? The daughter will be like you and the son will be like me. Xianyuan Mose said. As soon as the words fell, a smile appeared on his face. It seemed that he was imagining the appearance of the 2 little people in front of them in the future. The husband and wife here discussed here, laughing from time to time. Ling Shuang, who was not far away, looked at them. Not long after, Qin Xian brought the stewed soup to the table. Master, this soup should be drunk while it's hot. Okay, you can leave first. As Xianyuan Mose spoke, he took the bowl of soup and blew on it. Seeing that it was still smoking, he said to Fengjiu, it's too hot. Let's cool it down first. Don't burn yourself. Yes. Fengjiu looked at him with one hand under his chin. Seeing him sitting in the wheelchair and holding the bowl of stewed soup in his hand to cool it down, Fengjiu couldn't help but be infatuated with him. He was so outstanding. His handsome and resolute face had the unique charm of a man. Especially after going through so many things, he had become more mature and steady. His every move made people feel at ease. It made her feel that as long as he was by her side, no matter where she was, she would feel peaceful and at ease. The 2 of them had been to so many places, and there were mansions everywhere. But everywhere they went, as long as he was there, her heart would be at ease, and it was where her home was. Chapter 38:20. Fengjiu pursed her lips into a smile, I think you're very pleasing to the eye. The years were so peaceful and the days were so sweet. All of this was not easy to come by. Hearing her words, Xianyuan Mose's black eyes also revealed a smile. He put the soup in his hand on the table and reached out to hold her hand. Their fingers intertwined and a deep voice with a trace of love and affection came out of his mouth, the days are long. You can slowly appreciate it. The days are long. She softly replied. Seeing him push the bowl of soup in front of her, she picked it up and took a sip. How is it? Is it still hot? Xianyuan Mose asked. No, it's just right. This was a nourishing stew. She drank a bowl every morning and night for the past few days. During this time, she felt that she had gained more than 1 size. After drinking the soup, she handed it to Qin Xian who was waiting on the side. She saw him take out a small package from his sleeve. What is it? She peeked her head out to look. Sugar lotus seeds. Xianyuan Mose opened the small paper package in his hand and said, "Didn't you say that you were tired of drinking soup every day? I specially had someone buy sugar lotus seeds. Every time you drink a bowl of soup, you can eat one or two." As he spoke, he used a bamboo stick wrapped in a paper package to poke one into her mouth. "Try it." Feng Jiu's heart was filled with sweetness. With a smile on her face, she glanced at him and opened her mouth to eat the sugar-coated lotus seed. The fine sugar powder in her mouth was accompanied by the fragrance of the lotus seed. It was sweet and delicious, and she couldn't help but narrow her eyes. "It's delicious." Seeing that he was about to put it away, she said, "You can keep it for me. I can eat it when I'm free. Don't eat too much. One or two occasionally is enough, so I'll keep it." Xianyuan Mose said as he gave her another one. Then he said, "Do you want to go back and sleep?" Feng Jiu looked at him and said with a smile, "I'm going back to sleep after drinking a bowl of soup. Aren't you afraid that I'll be so fat that you won't be able to recognize me?" Xianyuan Mose couldn't help but chuckle. "I could recognize you even when your face was ruined. You've only gained weight. How could I not recognize you?" Hearing his words, Feng Jiu was slightly startled. He said softly, "That's right. Back then, you were able to recognize me even when I was like that. Now that I think about it, I didn't even realize that so many years had passed. We've encountered quite a lot of things over the years." She lowered her eyes and said slowly, "Every time I feel happy that we can be together, I will think of Mo Chen who has passed away. I always feel like I owe him." Hearing her mention Mo Chen, Xianyuan Mose's eyes flashed. He thought of the scene during the battle, when Nalan Mo Chen was dying, and the name she called out. "We all owe him," Xianyuan Mose said. He held Feng Jiu's hand and said, "But he also wanted us to be happy. He wanted you to be happy too. This was his wish. Now that he's gone, we should live our lives well. Only when we're happy can we live up to everything he sacrificed his life for." Feng Jiu looked up at him and stared into his black eyes. After a long time, he nodded, "Yes, you're right. Even if he's gone, we'll never forget him." Chapter 38-21. What's the matter? Xianyuan Mose looked at her and asked. "Come with me." As she spoke, she took his hand and flicked her sleeve. In the next moment, the two of them disappeared from Leng Shuang and Qin Xian's sight. Leng Shuang and Qin Xian saw the two of them disappear out of thin air. They did not say anything and just watched quietly, standing in place and waiting. Those who followed their master all knew that he had a secret space treasure. Otherwise, he would not have been able to bring the Yama Lord here while he was unconscious. And this was something that only his confidants knew. Xianyuan Mose saw that she had brought him into the space and was surprised. However, he did not ask any questions and just let her push his wheelchair to the space spirit spring. "Look, there is a small golden lotus growing in the spirit spring. This golden lotus is emitting a faint golden light." Feng Jiu looked at the small golden lotus in the water and said, "When Mo Chen disappeared, he only left behind a golden lotus seed. This golden lotus seed was one of the golden lotus seeds that we obtained from the Stairway of Immortality. I gave him one and he kept it with him. I didn't expect that when he disappeared, only this golden lotus seed did not disappear." Xianyuan Mose looked at the small golden lotus and saw that it was floating in the spirit spring. Because the golden lotus was so small, if one did not look carefully or if Feng Jiu did not say anything, it would not have been easy to notice. The golden lotuses we obtained from the Stairway of Immortality were no ordinary objects. Even though they were not the original bodies of the ancient golden lotuses, they still had the aura of the ancient golden lotuses. Mo Chen left behind this lotus seed. Perhaps. He paused for a moment as he looked at the tiny golden lotus. Perhaps what? Feng Jiu looked at him. Xianyuan Mose looked up and said, "Do you remember that you told me that Tian Jizi once said that Mo Chen was born because of you and will also die because of you? You are the only one who can break through his tribulation of life." Feng Jiu was slightly startled and did not say anything. Xianyuan Mose looked at the spring water in front of him and said thoughtfully, "Maybe he can be reborn again." Feng Jiu's heart trembled as his gaze fell on the tiny golden lotus. Could Mo Chen be reborn? Would he appear again? Will he come back to life? Countless thoughts flashed through his mind, and in the end, only a soft murmur remained. If he can appear again, I only hope that the reborn him can live for himself. Xianyuan Mose didn't say anything, he just accompanied her quietly by the side of the spirit spring. After a while, the two people came out of the space. "Go back to your room and sleep for a while." Xianyuan Mose looked at Feng Jiu and said, "Rest more, don't be too tired." Without waiting for Feng Jiu to speak, he ordered Ling Shuang and Qin Xian, "Send your masters back to rest." "Yes." The two people responded and looked at each other before walking forward. Feng Jiu looked at him and asked, "What about you? Aren't you going back to the courtyard with me? You woke up early today, why don't you go back and sleep? I have some things to instruct Hui Lang, you go back first. I'll be there later." He patted her hand, indicating that she should go back first. Seeing this, Feng Jiu didn't ask any more questions. He just nodded and followed Ling Shuang and the others back. Xianyuan Mose sat in the same place and watched her leave. When she couldn't be seen, he withdrew his gaze and called, "Ying Yi." Chapter 38-22. Tell them to investigate the Black Lotus. Is there any news? Xianyuan Mose asked in a low voice. Ever since he woke up, he had been accompanying Feng Jiu, but this matter had always been on his mind. Back then, the Black Lotus Lord had cultivated the power of the Black Lotus and was extremely powerful. Now, the Black Lotus Lord was dead, but the Black Lotus had fallen into the hands of the Demon Venerable. If he didn't settle this matter, he would be worried. Word came from Yen Dian that they couldn't find the whereabouts of the Demon Venerable. Not only are our people looking for him, but so are the other forces. However, the Demon Venerable hasn't shown himself since he took the Black Lotus. No one knows where he is hiding. Hearing this, Xianyuan Mose frowned. There was no news at all. Seeing his frown, Ying Yi said, "But don't worry, Master. Our people have been looking for him. I'm sure they'll report to you as soon as there's any news." "Yama Lord." As the two of them were talking, Leng Hua walked over and bowed to Xianyuan Mose. "What's the matter?" Xianyuan Mose looked at him and asked. "Duan Yunhe is here." As Leng Hua spoke, he realized that he might not know who Duan Yunhe was, so he said, "He's from the Lingxiao Celestial Sect. A few days ago." Before he could finish, he saw Duan Yunhe raise his hand to signal him to stop. Xianyuan Mose glanced at him and said, "This lord knows this person. Where is he now?" Leng Hua said, "He's in the front hall. It looks like he has an urgent matter and wants to see Master. But I heard from my sister that Master just fell asleep." Xianyuan Mose responded and waved his hand to signal Ying Yi to leave. He said to Leng Hua, "Push this lord over." "Yes." Leng Hua responded and pushed the wheelchair to the front hall. In the front hall, Duan Yunhe sat with a cup of tea in his hand, but he didn't drink it. Instead, he glanced outside from time to time, but Feng Jiu was nowhere to be seen. Du Fan and the others were not in the Fu. At this moment, only Hui Lang was sitting in the hall. Seeing his anxious expression, Hui Lang ate a piece of cake and asked, "Why don't you tell me? Why are you in such a hurry to find my madam?" Duan Yunhe glanced at Hui Lang but didn't say anything. He placed the teacup in his hand on the table and lowered his eyes. Seeing that he really didn't say anything, Hui Lang was too lazy to ask again. He just drank his tea and ate the pastries. After finishing his cup of tea, he was about to call the servants outside to add more tea when he saw his master coming over. He was so scared that he immediately stood up and walked out quickly. "Master? Why are you here?" Hui Lang asked, glancing at Leng Hua. Why did he invite his master here? Xian Yuanmos glanced at Hui Lang and asked, "What are you doing here?" Master, I just came back and was about to go to the rear courtyard when I saw this man come over. Then, I bumped into this person who came to the manor, so I stood guard here," he said embarrassedly, rubbing his head and moving to the side. Xian Yuanmos didn't bicker with him, and after he saw him leave, his gaze fell on the person who stood up inside, and coldly sized him up with a forceful and fierce gaze. "You're Duan Yunhe?" he asked in a deep voice. "Yes. May I know who you are?" Duan Yunhe couldn't help but feel astonished when he saw the black-robed man sitting in the wheelchair. Who is this person? He's so outstanding. Chapter 38-23. This is my lord. Leng Hua's voice rang out at this moment, simply informing Duan Yunhe of Xian Yuanmos' identity. Hearing this, Duan Yunhe's heart trembled. "My lord, that was Madame Xuanyuan's husband." Thus, he hurriedly cupped his hands and bowed before saying, "I've taken the liberty to visit. I truly have an urgent matter to report. If I've been rude in any way, please don't blame me." "Speak, what is it?" Xian Yuanmos came to the main seat, and the servant served him tea before retreating. At this moment, Duan Yunhe said, "I went out some time ago and only returned to the Immortal Sect yesterday. However, I heard that a few days ago, the Immortal Sect sent someone to the East City Lord's mansion to help out, but he was chased away in the end. After that person returned, he didn't go out and was only found dead in his cave residence yesterday. The Immortal Sect ordered an investigation and said that this matter was East City Lord Qi Kang's doing. Right now, they're already discussing bringing East City Lord Qi Kang back to the Immortal Sect to be dealt with." He spoke in one breath, then paused for a moment before continuing, "However, there are people in the Immortal Sect who know of your relationship with East City Lord Qi Kang. Now that things have gotten out of hand, people from the Immortal Sect should come to the small building at the center of the lake again. I hurriedly came to inform you when I heard the news." This was because he knew that Madame Xuanyuan's child was about to be born during this period of time. He was worried that this matter would implicate her. After hearing this, Xian Yuanmos glanced at him and asked, "You're also a member of the High Firmament Immortal Sect, but from what you've said, it seems that you don't suspect that this matter was done by our people." "Why?" Duan Yunhe was startled and looked at him. Seeing that his black eyes were fixed on him, Duan Yunhe couldn't help but feel his heart tremble. After regaining his senses, he said, "Because the people in the Immortal Sect didn't come into contact with you, but I'm different. I've been in contact with you since the beginning, and I also know that you're not that kind of person. However, the Immortal Sect Master is currently in seclusion, so I can't let him know. There are also people in the Immortal Sect who incited this matter, so that Xian Yuanmos did not ask who instigated it, nor did he ask what they would do to them. He only said indifferently, 'I know. You can go back.' Then, he said to Leng Hua, 'See the guest out. Please.' Leng Hua stepped forward with a gentle smile on his face. Duan Yunhe looked at Xian Yuanmos and hesitated for a moment before he said, 'I know that all of you are very strong, but this matter today wasn't ordered by the sect master. I hope that if you do anything, don't cause too much trouble for the Soaring Firmament Celestial Sect. Goodbye.' After saying that, he cupped his hands and bowed, then turned around and walked out. Seeing him leave, Xian Yuanmos' black eyes flashed with a dark light. He ordered in a deep voice, 'Call Du Fan and get to the bottom of this matter.' 'Yes.' Grey Wolf responded, and his figure flashed out. Not long after, Leng Hua returned. When he saw Xian Yuanmos in the hall, he asked, 'Yama Lord, if I count the days, Master should be due soon. Why don't we call everyone back?' Chapter 38-24. Hearing this, Leng Hua crossed his hands in front of him, bowed slightly, and replied respectfully, yes. At night, Fengjiu took out all the children's clothes from the cabinet and laid them out on the bed. She looked at them one by one and smiled. Today, Qin Xian and Leng Hua brought over a set of children's clothes. Look, these two were made by them. Their craftsmanship is really good. Sitting at the table, Xianyuan Mose closed the book in front of him and looked up at Fengjiu. He saw that she was holding two sets of children's underwear in her hands, one blue and one pink. They were very cute. He pushed the wheelchair forward to her side and said, "These two colors were chosen well. Have all the children's clothes been prepared? What about the other things that need to be used? Did you ask them to prepare them?" "Yes, they've all been prepared. Except for a few pieces of clothing that they made themselves, the rest were custom-made from outside." Fengjiu looked at the children's underwear, her face full of happiness and anticipation. "What do you think our children will look like after wearing these clothes?" When Xianyuan Mose heard this, he chuckled and said, "They'll still look the same. What else can they look like?" Fengjiu rolled her eyes at him. "Of course they'll be different. Look at this blue one. The sky blue color will make the children's skin look even better. And this pink one, they'll definitely look even cuter." "Yes, yes, yes, you're right." He responded dotingly and watched as she folded the clothes one by one. His heart was filled with satisfaction and happiness. "Master." Hui Lang's voice came from outside. Xianyuan Mose's smile disappeared and he said to Fengjiu, "Go to sleep first. Don't stay up too late. I'll be back soon." Fengjiu looked outside in surprise and said, "Why is Hui Lang here? Did something happen?" "It's just a small matter. Don't worry. Go to sleep." He gently patted her hand, telling her not to worry, and pushed the wheelchair out. As soon as he left the room, Hui Lang went up to him and said, "Master." Just as he was about to speak, he was stopped by his gaze. "Let's go to the study," Xianyuan Mose said and walked out. Hui Lang glanced at the room and quickly followed him. Fengjiu walked to the door with one hand on his waist and watched the two of them leave. She felt that he was hiding something from her, but since he said that it was not a big deal, it was just a small matter, so it should be just a small problem. If he did not say, she would not ask, because she believed that even if there was something, he would take care of it. She pursed her lips and smiled. She gently stroked her belly with one hand and said to Ling Shuang, who was waiting at the side, "Go and bring a bowl of bird's nest over." "Yes," Ling Shuang replied and walked out. Xianyuan Mose, who had gone to the study, looked at Du Fan and Hui Lang in front of him and said, "Du Fan, you tell them." He asked Hui Lang and Du Fan to investigate together because Du Fan was meticulous. He would take note of the details that Hui Lang might have missed. Yes. Chapter 38-25. We started our investigation from this Peak Master Sunday. Not only did we find out that the old man was killed by him, but we also found out that he was the one who instigated the other families to put a bounty on us. Therefore, we investigated his family and all the forces behind him. We found out that Peak Master Sun's name is Sun Wei, and he's a Peak Mid-Celestial. His family, the Sun family, is rooted in the eastern district of the Spirit Immortal City and has a deep friendship with the previous eastern city governor. The Sun family is ranked 4th in the Spirit Immortal City. It can be said that they're very powerful, and ordinary people wouldn't dare to provoke them easily. It's precisely because of the Sun family's influence that Sun Wei is considered one of the peak masters in the High Firmament Celestial sect. Hearing this, Xianyuan Mose's eyes darkened. He sat in his wheelchair and crossed his arms. His deep eyes revealed a sharp aura as he coldly ordered, "Collect all the evidence. Don't touch Sun Wei for now. This monarch wants his family to personally cripple him." Du Fan and Hui Lang glanced at each other and paused for a moment. Du Fan asked, what does the Yama Lord plan to do? Don't touch him, Sun family's patriarch. We can make the Sun family lose a few of their patriarchs, Xianyuan Mose said in a deep voice. Hearing this, Du Fan's heart moved. His eyes flashed with a smile as he replied, yes. I'll do it right away. Seeing that he didn't have any other orders, he bowed and left. First, they would shock the Sun family, and then let the Sun family personally cripple Sun Wei. First, they could weaken the Sun family's power and pull them down from their position as the fourth family in the city. Second, if the Sun family wanted to protect their family, they had to do it according to their wishes and personally cripple Sun Wei. This was much more interesting than killing Sun Wei themselves. Looking at the dark night, Du Fan revealed a smile. When he walked outside, he met Leng Hua in the front yard. Have you seen the Yama Lord? Do you have any orders? Leng Hua asked warmly. Yes, I have. I'm about to make a trip to the Sun family. Du Fan smiled. He gently fanned himself with the fan in his hand and asked, has everyone else returned? Leng Hua nodded and replied, yes, they're back. They're in the front hall. You can ask them to come over. All right, I'll go over and take a look. By the way, let them follow me to the Sun family. You stay in the manor to take care of Master. The Yama Lord's instructions are not to let Master know. I'm afraid she'll be worried. Hearing this, Leng Hua revealed a smile. Okay, I got it. You guys be careful. Du Fan nodded and walked towards the front yard. Leng Hua watched him leave and also walked away. In the front yard's hall, Gu Mo, Luo Yu, and the others sat in the hall drinking tea and chatting. They talked about the recent matters at hand and the news they had just received. The people of the Soaring Firmament Celestial sect are really endless. If they dare to make a move against Master, I'll definitely cripple them. Luo Yu coldly snorted. When he spoke of this matter, a murderous aura burst out from his body. However, according to Duan Yunhe, this matter doesn't seem to be the intention of the Soaring Firmament Celestial sect's sect master. He said that the sect master is in seclusion and doesn't know what's going on in the sect. Gu Mo said in a deep voice. Chapter 38-26. Alright. There's still no news about this. I heard that the Yama Lord has already sent Du Fan and Hui Lang to investigate. They've already returned. When they see the Yama Lord, we'll know what's going on. Fan Lin said warmly. He couldn't help but smile when he saw the killing intent in their eyes. As they were talking, they saw Du Fan walk in from outside. When he saw him, Fan Lin smiled and said, we were just talking about you. Du Fan smiled and walked forward. He sat down and said, you're talking about the High Firmament Immortal sect, right? I just went to the Yama Lord. The Yama Lord has already given orders. I was just about to come over and tell you guys. What did the Yama Lord say? Luo Yu asked. Leng Hua had already told them when he came over. The Yama Lord didn't intend to let their master know about this matter. He didn't want her to worry about these things, so he also told them to keep their mouths shut. Du Fan picked up the tea on the table and smiled. Hui Lang and I went to investigate. This matter was started by a peak master of the High Firmament Immortal sect called Sun Wei. He's been targeting us time and time again. The Yama Lord has already said that you guys should come with me to the Sun family. Go to the Sun family? Which Sun family? What about the peak master surnamed Sun? Does the Yama Lord not plan to let us do it? Luo Yu asked. Du Fan sipped his tea and said, the Sun family is Sun Wei's family. They're ranked fourth in the city and can be considered a family with a strong foundation. The Yama Lord said that we don't need to touch Sun Wei. Let the Sun family do it themselves. Luo Yu stood up and said, then what are we waiting for? Let's go now. Gu Mo glanced at Luo Yu and then asked, did the Yama Lord say to make a move on anyone from the Sun family? If you want the Sun family to cripple Sunway themselves, I reckon that those with lower status in the family won't be able to do so. Du Fan nodded and said with a smile, the Yama Lord said that Hui Lang and I also investigated the people of the Sun family. Come and take a look. He took out some documents from his sleeves and placed them on the table. He said to them one by one, the Yama Lord instructed me to make a move against the Sun family's family head generation. Thus, after investigating these people, I finally locked onto these few people. Several people gathered around and looked at the portraits on the table as well as the notes below the portraits about the people in the portraits. In the end, they all discovered that the 5 people who were chosen by Du Fan had a high status in the Sun family. Moreover, they were secretly ruthless in their methods. These people can be said to be the pillars of the Sun family. At the same time, these people have secretly done many heinous things. Since the Yama Lord doesn't mean to exterminate their entire family, it's best to choose these few people. Du Fan said as he pointed at the portraits. Hearing this, Guemo and the others nodded. That's good. Let's choose these few people. Since no one has any objections, let's go now. Du Fan stood up with a smile and gently fanned himself with the fan in his hand. He glanced outside and said, it's late at night and quiet. It's a good time to make a move. Just a few people will be enough, right? It'll be too obvious if we go together. Moreover, we still have to guard the manor. Guemo said as he looked at the people beside him. Then you stay. I'm going anyway. Luo Yu said as he took a step forward. Chapter 38-27. Chi Kong is in the East City Lord's manor and can't come back. Moreover, he's in charge of the East City district and can't leave. We'll guard the small building in the middle of the lake. It's enough for the 3 of them to go with me to the Sun family. You guys stay here and guard the house. Master can't lack people here. As Du Fan spoke, he looked at Bai Qingqing, since you're back, go to Master's side and take care of her. Especially since Master is about to give birth, she can't be without someone by her side. Okay, I'll be there in a while. Bai Qingqing nodded and replied. Guemo said, then you guys go. We'll guard here. Go early and come back early. Okay. The few of them responded and then went out. Their figures flashed and disappeared into the night in the blink of an eye. I'll go to Master's courtyard and change places with Qin Xian and the others. As Bai Qingqing spoke, she left first. In the night, a few figures quietly flitted towards the Sun family in the East City district. At this time, most of the people in the city had already gone to bed. No one knew what kind of shocking thing would happen in this seemingly calm night. As the 4th largest family in the city, the Sun family was naturally not ordinary. Other than the guards inside and outside, there were also many experts in the manor. If they encountered other people, they would probably choose anyone to attack but not the Sun family. However, it just so happened that they were targeted by Du Fan and the others. The 4 of them quietly entered the inner courtyard of the Sun family as if no one was there. As they didn't know which courtyard the person they were looking for was in, Du Fan gave a signal with his eyes and Wei Feng caught a guard. At the rockery, after they got the answer they wanted from the guard, they knocked him out and threw him into the rockery. Then, the 4 of them went to the courtyards in 4 different directions. In a courtyard, 2 people were entangled with each other. Faint sounds of heavy breathing and a woman's coquettish voice could be heard. Perhaps because the 2 people in the room were doing it, only a little maid was left outside the room to guard. There was not a single guard in the courtyard. Luo Yu flashed down, and his ghostly figure flashed past in an instant. Before the little maid could react, he had hit her acupuncture point and put her aside. Then he pushed the door open and walked in. Perhaps it was because they did not expect that someone would dare to barge into the Sun Manor at night, and even more so that someone would come to their room. As a result, the two people who were entangled in each other were intoxicated in that ecstasy, and simply did not notice that the room door had been quietly pushed open. Luo Yu silently walked inside. He stood by the screen and looked into the room. His gaze swept past the naked woman and landed on the middle-aged man lying on top of her. Seeing that his figure was robust and his muscles were distinct, it was obvious that his physique was not bad. At this moment, his face was flushed, and beads of sweat seeped out from his forehead. He had an appearance of ecstasy and excitement. Although he was not wearing any clothes at this moment, there was a strange flush on his face. However, he was indeed one of their targets. After confirming their target, he sneered and slowly walked out. When the woman was about to cry out in surprise, he hit her acupuncture point with a flick of his finger. "Who are you?" Sun Yao was shocked and his body suddenly trembled. Just as he was about to flip over and get down from the woman's body, he heard a voice that contained killing intent. "The person who wants you dead." Chapter 38-28. That person opened his mouth, yet wasn't able to make a single sound. His eyes were opened wide with terror, and his entire body fell down just like that, lying on top of the unconscious woman. Luo Yu glanced at the middle-aged man with disgust, and after he confirmed that the middle-aged man was dead, he walked out. On the other side, Wei Feng silently snuck into a courtyard. The person in the master bedroom was already sound asleep, and he could faintly hear the sound of snoring. He restrained his aura and walked over to the side of the bed, and with a wave of his hand, he set up a soundproof barrier before lifting up the bed curtains to take a look. A man and a woman were sleeping side by side on the bed, and the man was precisely the person he wanted to kill this time. Right after he raised his hand and tapped on the woman's sleeping acupoint, the middle-aged man that was sound asleep seemed to have noticed killing intent, and he instinctively opened his eyes. "Who is it?" A fierce shout sounded out, and he instinctively leaped up. However, he'd only just leaped up when a sword that was suffused with a cold light was pressed against his throat, and an icy cold and bone-piercing killing intent shot out with a sharp cold light, causing the hairs on his entire body to stand on end, and he didn't dare move in the slightest. Don't be rash. Let's talk." His face was ghastly pale, and his body stiffened and he didn't dare move, as he was deeply afraid that the sharp blade would slice open his throat if he moved. "There's nothing to talk about." As soon as Wei Feng finished speaking, the sword in his hand pulled out, and a cold light shot out. That person didn't even have the time to dodge before falling down. The smell of blood suffused the room, and he glanced at the middle-aged man whose eyes were wide open before withdrawing the sword in his hand. He wiped it clean and put it away, and then he raised his hand to remove the soundproof barrier in the air before walking out. Du Fan and the others were the same. After they killed their target, they arrived at the agreed-upon place to wait, and it wasn't long before they returned. "How was it?" Du Fan asked. Luo Yu smiled. "It's done. It's the same for us." The other two replied. Du Fan smiled and said, "Then let's go. I've already left a message in the Sun Clan's patriarch's room." "Let's go." They replied before leaping out of the Sun Clan and taking advantage of the night to return. In the second half of the night after they left, a shrill cry broke the silence of the Sun family. Due to the shrill cry, the guards and people in the mansion quickly rushed over. "What happened?" "Third Master. Third Master." The leader, a man in his 30s, knocked on the door and called out, but he only heard a woman's scream from inside. So, he gritted his teeth and rushed in, but after seeing the scene inside, he was a little dumbfounded. She saw two naked bodies lying on top of each other on the bed. The pale and panic-stricken beautiful woman cried out in alarm as she tried to push the person on top of her away. However, because their bodies were still connected, she couldn't push the person away no matter how hard she tried. Instead, the person who rushed in saw everything. When had the guards in the mansion ever seen such an erotic scene? He was dumbfounded. His eyes stared at the beautiful woman's naked body and her snake-like waist. One of them regained his senses and took a step forward. He hesitantly asked the man in the lead, "Captain, is this third master my phone?" Chapter 38-29. However, just as they walked out, cries of alarm came from other places. There were even people who cried out in alarm as they ran over. "Not good. Not good. Guard captain, that. The one who ran over to report was a guard. Because he ran in a hurry and was frightened, he was already panting by the time he arrived in front of everyone. The head guard glanced outside and faintly heard the commotion outside. With a sullen face, he asked, "What's going on?" "Speak slowly." 11th Master, and the other 3 elders, they are all dead. The guard's face was pale as he spoke, his heart thumping wildly. This was going to be a big deal. 5 people were killed in one night, and all of them were of the same generation as the patriarch. They all had high statuses in the family, but now, they were silently killed. They didn't even know who did it. When did their Sun family become a place where assassins could come and go as they pleased? Hearing the guard's words, the guard captain's face also changed. He immediately asked, "Where is the patriarch? Where are the elders in the family? Quickly go and report." Yes. The guard responded and hurriedly ran off. The guard captain's face was sullen as he strode into the room. The woman had already put on her clothes in a mess and was curled up in a corner. The dead third master on the bed was completely naked, only covered by a blanket. He went forward to check and saw that there were no other fatal wounds on his body. The only fatal wound was that the top of his head was smashed. This result made his heart sink. He immediately turned to look at the woman curled up in a corner and asked in a low voice, "Madam Hong, did you see who killed third master?" This woman was third master's concubine. It was because of this that they didn't dare to not retreat earlier to avoid being criticized. No, when I woke up, I saw that third master was already dead. Woo. The woman covered her face as she wept. She was both shocked and embarrassed. She was shocked because the man she had made love with had actually died on top of her. When she opened her eyes, she saw his eyes wide open and blood flowing from his mouth, nose, and eyes. She was so frightened that she panicked. She was embarrassed because her naked body had actually been seen by those guards. How could she stand in front of others in the future? Thinking that the man she could rely on was dead and that First Madam might take the opportunity to execute her, she cried even more sadly and fearfully. Dress the third master. Leave 2 people behind to guard. The rest of you, come with me. He shouted in a low voice, then turned around and walked out quickly. Something big had happened in the manor. All the elders were woken up from their beds and gathered in the main hall. However, when the elders looked around, they didn't see the patriarch. They were shocked and asked in a trembling voice, "Where's the patriarch? Where's the patriarch? Will the patriarch also?" Now that such a big incident had happened, all the clan elders were present. Why was the clan head nowhere to be seen? Could something have happened to him as well? Thinking of this possibility, the great elder of the Sun family quickly shouted, "Quick! Come with me to take a look." Everyone rushed out in a flurry. Their footsteps were disorderly, and their expressions were anxious as they rushed to the main courtyard. When they arrived at the main courtyard, they saw a guard knocking on the door and shouting. The first elder quickly stepped forward. "What's going on? Where's the patriarch?" Chapter 38-30. The guard lowered his head and didn't dare to speak. He quickly reported outside and then went to report to the others. Who knew that the patriarch didn't make a move? Could it be that something happened to him? Thinking of this, the cold sweat on the guard's forehead couldn't help but drip down. Who was so powerful? To be able to avoid everyone in the residence and enter the residence to kill so many people. One had to know that those who died weren't ordinary people. They were the central pillars of the Sun residence. Any one of them would be able to shake a region with their strength. But they had been silently killed just like that. How could they not be scared witless? Break open the door. The great elder immediately ordered, and the guard captain strode forward from the back and slammed the door open. After the door was knocked open, the great elder quickly led his men inside. Patriarch! Patriarch! He quickly walked into the inner room. When he saw the motionless figure on the bed, everyone's heart couldn't help but sink. The first elder strode forward and lifted the bed curtain to take a look. When he saw the person on the bed, he heaved a sigh of relief. He turned back and said to everyone, "He's fine, he's fine. He just fainted." When everyone heard this, their anxious hearts were finally at ease. They watched as the first elder took out a medicine and let the patriarch smell it. Not long after, the unconscious person slowly woke up. "Patriarch, you're awake." The first elder sighed and helped him sit up. "What happened? Why did you all?" As Patriarch's son spoke, he rubbed the back of his neck that was hurting. However, halfway through his words, he paused. He was shocked and said, "Someone has snuck in." Sigh. The first elder sighed and said, "Not only did someone sneak in, but he also killed 5 people. Moreover, we don't know who sneaked in and killed them. We don't know why he's going against our Sun family." Just as he finished speaking, the guard captain shouted, "Patriarch, first elder, there are words here." Everyone was stunned and quickly walked to the place that the guard mentioned. Under the light, they saw words written with a sword carved on the bedpost. The great elder stepped forward and read the words, "3 days later, if Sun Werua is still alive, it will be the time when the Sun family will be wiped out." As soon as this was said, everyone was shocked. Sun Wei. Wasn't this 7th brother of the High Firmament Celestial sect? Could it be that 5 people died tonight because Sun Wei offended someone, so the other party came to seek revenge? The great elder's heart trembled when he saw those words. They actually made a move against the Sun family because of Sun Wei. 3 days later, if Sun Wei was still alive, would it be the time when the entire Sun family would be wiped out? These words were arrogant and ruthless. If it was any other time, they would at most laugh it off. However, these words were left behind after killing 5 people with extraordinary status and strength in their estate, so they had no choice but to take it to heart. The other party was telling them that it would be easy for them to wipe out the entire Sun clan. When he thought about how even the patriarch was knocked out and left behind these words, he knew this was not a small matter. Moreover, the person who made a move tonight was even more extraordinary. Those who were present were all old foxes who had seen the world. At this time, they also thought of this point. Therefore, their expressions were solemn, and no one took these words as a joke. After a moment of silence, they looked at the patriarch and first elder. Chapter 38-31. Seeing that everyone's eyes were on the two of them, Patriarch's son and the great elder looked at each other and asked in a deep voice, "Who are the 5 people who died?" Hearing this, the great elder said, "They are all in the front hall. Let's go. Let's go and discuss it together." Seeing this, Patriarch's son put on his outer robe and followed them out. Before leaving the room, he looked back. The words on the bedpost gave him a great shock. Did the other party leave him to deal with Sun Wei? Otherwise, why did he only knock him out and not kill him? Thinking of this, he walked to the front hall with a heavy heart with a taut face. When he arrived at the front hall and saw the 5 corpses placed side by side in the hall, Patriarch's son's expression changed. On the way here, someone had already told him who the 5 people were. However, when he saw the 5 corpses lying side by side on the ground, his face immediately turned pale. If the other party wanted to kill, there would not be 5 corpses here, but 6. He went forward to check and saw that the 5 people were all killed in one shot. The method was clean and neat. It was almost obvious that the 5 people of the Sun family did not even have the chance to resist before they died. He took a deep breath and suppressed the shock in his heart. He walked to the main seat and sat down. Then he looked at everyone and asked, "Who did Sun Wei offend recently? How did they find the Sun family? I haven't heard of it. As far as I know, he has been in the Immortal sect recently and hasn't left the mountain," a middle-aged man said. He also couldn't figure it out. Humph. Just because he hasn't left the mountain doesn't mean that he hasn't offended anyone. I think he has offended someone and doesn't dare to leave the mountain. An old man snorted with an ugly expression. He flicked his sleeve and said, "He offended someone and implicated his family. He really deserves to die." Among the people who died, one of them was his son. Now that he saw his son die so tragically, how could he not be resentful? An old man stroked his beard and said, "I think the other party is just bluffing. Our Sun family is a century-old family with a strong foundation. How can he destroy our entire family just because he wants to?" The old man glanced at him and said sarcastically, "That's because the one who died wasn't your son. There are so many people in the mansion, but no one knows how the other party managed to sneak in. Even the patriarch was knocked unconscious. Do you still think those people are ordinary people? Was it just a bluff? If it was just a bluff, then 5 people wouldn't have died in one night." Hearing this, the old man who was stroking his beard still wanted to say something, but when he saw everyone's gazes fall on him, he moved his lips but didn't say anything in the end. He only said, "No matter what, Patriarch should make the decision. No matter what the decision is, I have no objections." Sun family head pondered for a moment before saying, "I'll have to ask the ancestor about this." Then, he looked at the Great Elder and asked, "What do you think, Great Elder?" The Grand Elder nodded. "Yes, we have to ask the Patriarch. Since Sun Wei entered the High Heaven Celestial sect, he has contributed a lot to our clan. Moreover, he is not weak. Even if we really want to make a move on him, we have to ask the Patriarch to make a move." Patriarch Sun nodded, looked at the crowd, and asked, "Do you have any objections?" "We have no objections." Everyone replied. Chapter 38-32. This matter was related to their lives. Even without the Patriarch's instructions, everyone knew that they should keep their mouths shut. Therefore, they all replied respectfully, "Patriarch, don't worry. We understand. Great Elder, come with me to ask the ancestor." Patriarch Sun said as he looked at the Great Elder. "Okay." The Great Elder nodded and followed him out. That night was a sleepless night for the Sun family. Now that something like this happened in the middle of the night, no one was in the mood to sleep. Instead, they sat down in groups and discussed this matter. Some people went out to make arrangements so that the servants in the mansion could not leak any information. On the other side, Du Fan and the others returned to the small house in the center of the lake. As their masters had already rested, they did not disturb them. Instead, they asked the kitchen to prepare a few dishes and found a place to eat and drink with 2 pots of wine. The next day, in the Soaring Firmament Celestial sect, Peak Master Sun did not know that something had happened in the family. At this moment, he was in the law enforcement hall talking to a few law enforcement supremacies. Chi Kong has just taken the position of the East City Lord, and he has already done something like this. If we let this go on, I'm afraid that he will really bully our Soaring Firmament Celestial sect in the future. Law Enforcement Elder, this is not the first time that these people have attacked our Celestial sect. Have you forgotten what happened a while ago? They were simply condescending. If we let this go on, how can our Soaring Firmament Celestial sect establish a foothold on this continent in the future? Hearing this, one of the law enforcement elders hesitated and said, before the sect leader went into seclusion, he told us not to do anything to those people. Although we did not expect them to be hiding in the flying immortal city, the sect leader has already given the order. It is not good to act behind his back. That's right. We are from the Soaring Firmament Celestial sect. Although we are law enforcement supremacies, without the sect leader's order, it is not appropriate to act abruptly. One of the law enforcement supremacies said in a deep voice. Hearing that they had changed their minds one by one, his face turned ugly. Are we just going to let them go like this? That was not what you said yesterday. Why did you change your mind today? The law enforcement supremacies did not speak. They only took a sip of tea. The law enforcement elder did not speak either. No one knew what he was thinking. At this moment, a white figure walked in from outside. Why is Peak Master Sun so anxious to deal with them? Could it be that they were hindering Peak Master Sun's interests? Or does he have some grudge with Peak Master Sun? Hearing this voice, Peak Master Sun immediately turned around with a cold glint in his eyes. Duan Yunhe. So it's you. He was wondering why the venerables of the enforcement hall had suddenly retreated. So it was because of Duan Yunhe. Greetings, law enforcement elder and venerables. Duan Yunhe cupped his hands and bowed to them. The group nodded and looked at the two before the enforcement elder said, let's put this matter aside for now. We'll wait for the sect master to come out before we make a decision. If Peak Master Sun has any objections, you can speak to the elders. A wisp of dim light flashed through Sun Wei's eyes when he heard this. He looked at them and said, enforcement elders, could it be that we're just going to allow them to kill our people like this? Wouldn't that disappoint the sect disciples? There's no evidence to prove that they did it, Duan Yunhe said. Chapter 38-33. Peak Master, the people from your clan have come, a disciple reported in a low voice. Peak Master Sun was slightly surprised when he heard that, but he did not show it on his face. He only clasped his hands at the person from the disciplinary hall, then glanced at Duan Yunhe before turning to leave. Just as he was about to go to his residence, the disciple who had reported to him said, Peak Master, the people from your clan haven't come in. They're waiting for you at the sect entrance. Peak Master Sun frowned when he heard that. Only then did he walk towards the sect entrance. In the past, people would always come in. Why weren't they here this time? Why were they waiting at the sect entrance? When he arrived, he was even more surprised when he saw who it was, third elder, second uncle. Why are you here? When the two of them saw him, their eyes flashed. The third elder said, the ancestor wants you to come back with us. Has something happened in the clan? He asked sharply. He felt that if it wasn't for the clan, the two of them would not have come to find him personally. Could it be that something very serious had happened? That's right. Something has happened in the clan, and it's very serious, the third elder said with a serious expression. He looked at him and said, even the ancestor has been alerted. That's why he wants you to go back. Hearing that, he nodded and said, all right, then tell this disciple what to do. With that, he said a few words to a disciple behind him before leaving with them. After the disciple watched him leave, he went back inside to report to the elder. On the other side, Xianyuan Mose was strolling around the residence with Fengjiu. He did not tell Fengjiu about what had happened, and Fengjiu did not ask about it either. The days passed peacefully and comfortably. After walking around, Fengjiu sat down under a tree. He looked at Xianyuan Mose and asked with a smile, why have they all come back? Xianyuan Mose's expression remained the same. He glanced at Bai Qingcheng and Ling Shuang, who were not far away, and said, we've finished dealing with the matters at hand. There's nothing important, so we've come back. As he spoke, he looked at her and asked, didn't you say you wanted to eat lotus leaf chicken before going to bed last night? I asked Ling Shuang to tell the kitchen staff to prepare it today. It should be ready now. Why don't we eat here? Sure. Fengjiu smiled. Sitting on the stone table under the tree, a cool breeze brushed against one's face. The scenery was pleasant. Eating here would probably improve one's appetite. Ling Shuang, bring the dishes here, Xianyuan Mose called out to Ling Shuang, who was not far away. Understood, Ling Shuang replied. Just as he was about to leave, Bai Qingqing said, I'll go. You just stay here and keep watch. Hearing this, Ling Shuang nodded and asked her to go to the kitchen to bring the food while he stayed where he was. Not long after, Bai Qingqing came back with the food, followed by 2 servant girls who also carried the food. They placed the food on the table and then left. After Fengjiu and Xianyuan Mose washed their hands, they opened the lotus leaf chicken. As soon as the lotus leaf was opened, the fragrance of lotus assailed their nostrils. Just as Fengjiu was about to eat, Xianyuan Mose stopped him. Seeing Fengjiu looking at him, Xianyuan Mose's lips curled up slightly, I'll do it. As he spoke, he used a small knife and chopsticks to cut the chicken into small pieces and placed them in her bowl. Fengjiu saw this and smiled. She used her chopsticks to pick up a piece and brought it to his mouth, eat it while it's hot. Xianyuan Mose opened his mouth and ate it. Fengjiu smiled and picked up a piece to eat. Chapter 38-34. The members of the Sun family all had solemn expressions. After the incident last night, no one was allowed to go out because they were worried that someone would accidentally leak the news. Therefore, other than the 2 people who went to the Lingxiao celestial sect to bring Sun Wei back with the patriarch's token, no one else stepped out of the Sun family's gate. At this moment, in the ancestral hall of the Sun family, Sun Wei, who was tied up by the immortal binding rope, was forced to kneel on the ground. He struggled with a face full of disbelief. What are you doing? What are you doing? He thought that something had happened in the family, but who knew that when he returned to the family, he was tied up and his spiritual power was completely lost under the effect of the immortal binding rope. He didn't even know what was going on. Why did the people in the family treat him like this? Standing on both sides of the ancestral hall were the elders of the clan as well as the pillars of the clan. Seeing them all staring at him with serious expressions, his heart couldn't help but sink. He faintly had a bad premonition. The patriarch is here. A loud shout came from outside. Everyone looked outside and saw the patriarch of the Sun family walking in with a black wooden cane in his hand. Behind him were the patriarch and the great elder. Patriarch, Sun Wei greets the patriarch. Seeing the patriarch of the Sun family, Sun Wei immediately wanted to bow. However, because he was tied up, he couldn't bow with his hands. He could only bow and lower his head. Patriarch, what crime did I commit? Why am I being treated like this when I return to the family? Sun Wei suppressed the anger and injustice in his heart and asked. He didn't think that he had done anything to let down the family. In fact, when he heard that something had happened to the family, he rushed back without saying a word. But who knew that what was waiting for him when he returned was actually such a force? The patriarch of the Sun family walked to the front and stood upright. He held his cane with both hands and looked at Sun Wei who was kneeling in front of him. He said, "What is the 7th rule of the Sun family? Recite it for me." The 7th rule of the Sun family? Sun Wei was stunned and looked at the patriarch who had a sullen face. That's right, the 7th rule, the patriarch replied and looked at Sun Wei expressionlessly. The 7th rule of the Sun family. If you make enemies outside, you must not bring disaster to the family. He muttered, but when he said this, he couldn't help but be stunned. His heart suddenly trembled. Patriarch, what is going on? I was treated like this as soon as I came back. Even if I did something wrong, please let me understand what I did wrong. Great Elder, why don't you tell him why he is being treated like this, and why he is kneeling here? The patriarch of the Sun family's patriarch's voice, but the patriarch of the Sun family, the patriarch of the Sun family. Patriarch. The first elder respectfully replied. He took a step forward and looked at the kneeling Sun Wei. He said, "You've made enemies outside, but you've implicated the family. Last night, 5 people from the Sun family died, and they weren't ordinary members of the Sun family. They were 5 people of the same generation as you." When he heard this, he was dumbfounded for a moment. 5 people died in one night. Killed. Chapter 38-35. Hearing these words and looking at the formation of the crowd, he felt his vision darken and he almost fainted. So they captured him and wanted him dead because of this? Ancestor, ancestor. We don't even know who they are. Could it be that they want to decide my life and death with just one sentence? He straightened his back and asked the ancestor. The ancestor narrowed his eyes and asked, "Don't you know who you offended?" Offended who? As he muttered, he thought to himself, "When did I offend anyone? I've been in the sect recently." His voice suddenly paused as if he thought of something and his eyes suddenly widened. The ancestor saw his expression and raised his eyelids. His old voice was filled with pressure and fierceness as he asked, "Who is it?" "It must be them. It must be them." Sun Wei sat on the ground as if he had lost his soul. He couldn't even kneel. At this moment, he thought of what they had done in the past. He thought of how the families of those disciples had been wiped out. He thought of how they didn't even dare to put up their portraits on the bounty board. Previously, this matter didn't concern him, so he didn't take them seriously. However, when it happened to him, he realized how terrifying this fear was. Could it be that they knew that he was behind all this? Was that why they wanted to settle the score with him? Or did they find out that he had killed the steward of the sect and framed them for it? Do you know who they are? The ancestor's old voice was filled with pressure as he stared at Sun Wei. Although he had people bring Sun Wei back, when he thought of how someone had offended his Sun family and killed 5 pillars of the Sun family in one night, the anger in his heart surged. It seemed that he had been in closed-door cultivation for too long and the Sun family had been silent for too long. That was why they had been bullied. It's the new city lord of the Eastern District, Qi Kong. It must be them. Sun Wei said as he looked at the ancestor. It must be them, it must be them. Hearing this, the ancestor frowned. The new city lord of the Eastern District, Qi Kong. What was going on? I heard that the new city lord of the East District, Qi Kong, has a mysterious background and extraordinary strength. Moreover, he single-handedly took down the position of City Lord of the East District and is now firmly seated in the East City Lord Mansion. How did you provoke such a person? I. His face was ghastly pale, and he looked absent-minded as he muttered to himself. Also, how can you be sure that it was Qi Kong, the governor of the Eastern District, who killed our Sun family members? The old ancestor asked again. Seeing that the old ancestor was in a daze, his face sank and he shouted, "Speak." A voice filled with pressure shouted out, causing his heart to skip a beat. He regained his composure and said, "Several months ago, a peak master of the immortal sect was killed and over a dozen elite disciples had their cultivations crippled. It was done by them." Chapter 38-36. Hearing this, many people in the ancestral hall sucked in a breath of cold air. Someone exclaimed, "You mean, those people who were on the bounty list and then removed? God! Why did you provoke those people? Could it be that you've been spreading rumors about how mysterious and powerful those people are? You actually dared to provoke them? No wonder they attacked our Sun family and killed 5 of our Sun family members in one night. What a sin! Why did you provoke those people? Those are people that even your immortal sect avoids. You actually provoked them for a dead peak master and a dozen disciples whose cultivation had been crippled. You really wasted the family's efforts to nurture you since you were young and sent you to the immortal sect at all costs. You are destroying your own future and courting death. It doesn't matter if you die. The most hateful thing is that you actually harmed the family. My poor son died because of you. You are really blind. Why don't they kill you? Looking at the chaos in the ancestral hall, the face of the old man from the Sun family who was standing in the middle sank. He slammed the crutch in his hand heavily on the ground. All right. Quiet down. The old man's old voice contained pressure and sharpness. As soon as these words came out, no one dared to speak again. They just stared at Sun Wei, who was sitting on the ground. Because the Sun family's old ancestor was in seclusion most of the time, he only knew that the new East District City Lord had a mysterious origin and extraordinary strength, but he didn't know which group they were talking about a few months ago. However, looking at everyone's expression, he didn't say much. He just looked at Sun Wei, who was sitting on the ground, and asked, "That was a few months ago. They didn't find the Sun family, so they probably didn't know it was you who did it. Then why did they attack the Sun family this time? Could it be that you've been doing something to attract their attention?" Hearing the old ancestor's words, Sun Wei only felt cold sweat on his forehead. Others only noticed other things, but no one caught the main point like the old ancestor. Yes, it was because he had been secretly stirring up trouble recently, and it was against those people. Perhaps this was why they noticed him and made a move against the Sun family. However, could he say this directly? If he said it directly, he was afraid that he would die faster. "Don't make me ask a second time." The Sun family's ancestor shouted in a deep voice. Sun Wei's body trembled and he quickly said, "Ancestor, it's like this. I thought that he had just become the East District City Lord not long ago, so I wanted to pull him down and help our Sun family to become the East District City Lord. So I secretly did something, but before I could do it, they had already made their move. Ancestor, no matter what, I did it for the good of the clan. Ancestor, you can't attack your own clansmen just because of their threat. I'm a disciple of the clan. Over the years, I've done so many things for the clan. Even if I didn't make any contributions, I've worked hard. Ancestor. Done. The Sun family's ancestor shouted in a deep voice. He narrowed his eyes and glanced at him. I know what I'm doing. Men, take him to the dungeon first. Without my permission, no one is allowed to see him. Yes. 2 guards came in from outside, pulled him up, and escorted him out. Chapter 38-37. The Sun family's ancestor glanced at him and said, "Previously, we didn't know who did it. Naturally, we need to know their strength and origin. Our Sun family is a century-old family. How can we kill our clansmen because of a few words? If they want our Sun family's property in the future, do we have to give it to them?" Hearing this, everyone was silent for a while. Ancestor, the new East City Lord, Qi Kong, is said to be a peak high god expert. As for the other people mentioned by Sun Wei, we haven't met them, so we don't know what they are like. The Sun family's patriarch paused for a moment before continuing. However, one thing is certain. They are very powerful. Although the clans that were annihilated by them were not top-notch first-rate clans, they could still be considered middle-tier clans. Yet, they were annihilated in a single night. From this, it can be seen that these people are not simple. The Sun family's ancestor held the black wooden cane in his hand and said, "If that's the case, then we really have to meet them. Let's see how strong they are." As soon as he finished speaking, the pressure on his body spread out. It was only when everyone in the ancestral hall felt the powerful pressure that they remembered this. Their ancestor was also a peak high god expert. Moreover, he had been a peak high god expert for a long time. Even if the East City Lord, Qi Kong, was a peak high god expert, it was estimated that he had just advanced. How could he compare with their ancestor? Thinking of this, everyone's hearts calmed down. Those people were rumored to be so powerful, but only Qi Kong appeared in front of them. No one knew where the others were hiding. If their ancestor joined forces with the experts of the Sun family, why would they be afraid of Qi Kong alone? At this time, they were thinking that the person who sneaked into the Sun family and killed 5 of their clansmen should be Qi Kong. However, they didn't expect that the other people who rarely showed up had already infiltrated the Flying Deity City. Therefore, after a discussion, they decided to wait until tonight to investigate the East City Governor's mansion. First, they would capture Qi Kong and interrogate him for information about the others, as well as the purple golden spirit deer. The members of the Sun clan unanimously approved of this decision. After all, the temptation of the violet gold spirit deer was too great. Moreover, because their ancestor was a peak-high god, they were confident that they could fight Qi Kong and capture him. They didn't expect that their greed and luck would cause the Sun clan to walk down the path of destruction. As a century-old family, their foundation was naturally not weak. Therefore, after nightfall, the Sun family's great ancestor, who had made the necessary arrangements, brought 8 people to change into night clothes and went to the East City Lord's mansion. The 9 people quietly sneaked into the East City Lord's mansion. Just as they entered the City Lord's mansion, a Sun family cultivator was about to step out, but he was pulled back by a pair of hands. "Ancestor." That person was startled and called out in a low voice, not understanding what was going on. "There is a formation here." An old voice came out in a low voice. After he pulled that person back, he stared at the formation and pondered. After a while, he gestured for them to go in the other direction. Arriving at the side of a fake mountain, they flashed into the fake mountain. One of them said, "Ancestor, the main courtyard where Qi Kong lives is over there." Chapter 38:38. When everyone heard this and thought of his previous instructions, their eyes flashed and they nodded, "Yes." "Then let's go," he said in a low voice and led the 8 of them to Qi Kang's courtyard. At this moment, Qi Kong was reading information in his room. He picked up the ginseng tea on the table and took a sip. Just as he was about to continue reading, he faintly sensed something. Thus, he raised his head and looked outside. He put away the things on the table and walked out. After opening the door, the 2 guards outside bowed and called out, "City Lord, do you have any orders?" They were surprised, thinking that he was hungry in the middle of the night and wanted to eat something of the sort. Qi Kong looked at the night sky with his hands behind his back. His eyes moved slightly and he waved his hand at the 2 of them, "You can leave now. You don't have to be on night duty tonight." "Yes." The 2 of them responded and left. As the 2 guards retreated, the courtyard became even quieter. He did not turn around and enter the room. Instead, he stood in front of the room and looked ahead, saying, "Since you're here, why hide?" Hearing this, the people of the Sun family were shocked and could not help but look at each other. The Sun family's great ancestor's eyes darkened. His sharp gaze locked onto Qi Kong. In the next moment, after making a gesture, he stepped out. City Lord Qi is indeed as extraordinary as the outside world says. Qi Kong saw one person walk out and a few people hiding in the dark. He could not help but twitch the corner of his mouth. His gaze fell on the black-clothed person who only revealed a pair of eyes. From the other party's voice, he knew that this person was an old man. Moreover, this old man's strength was on par with his. "Who are you? Why did you come to the East City Lord's mansion in the middle of the night?" he asked in a low voice. His voice was neither arrogant nor humble, and his bearing was calm. Seeing this, the Sun family's great ancestor was secretly vigilant. He did not say much. Instead, he suddenly attacked Qi Kong. An overwhelming pressure rolled up and a powerful airflow rushed towards him. Whoosh! Swish! Qi Kang's expression didn't change, but a cold glint flashed in his eyes. He looked at the old man rushing over and waved his hand, sending out a powerful qi flow to block the old man's attack. 2 high deity-level auras filled the air in the courtyard, causing the 8 people hiding in the dark to feel nervous. The commotion in the courtyard had attracted the guards of the city lord's mansion. They could not help but look anxiously at the 2 people fighting in the courtyard. According to the ancestors' arrangement, they had to wait for a suitable time to make a move. Now that the 2 of them were evenly matched, they couldn't help but feel anxious. They were afraid that if they were exposed, tonight's matter would push their Sun family to eternal damnation. Phew! Rumble! Bang! The 2 of them exchanged blows, and their fierce attacks destroyed more than half of the things in the courtyard. A stream of air fiercely shot out. Qi Kong dodged, and the attack landed on the wall. In an instant, the wall emitted a loud bang, followed by cracking sounds. Cracks appeared on the wall, and it collapsed with a rumble. City Lord. Chapter 38-39. The guards had to retreat and could only watch the battle from afar. At this time, they did not notice that there were 8 men in black hiding in the dark, waiting for an opportunity to strike. Whoosh whoosh. Bang. Bang bang. The 2 people in the courtyard became more and more excited as they fought. The powerful airflow not only attracted the guards in the East City Lord Mansion, but also alarmed the people outside the mansion. In the eastern part of the city, the ancestors of some powerful families felt the pressure and the surging of the airflow. They were secretly shocked. They flew up into the sky and stood on the roofs of their families to look into the distance. When they saw that the movement was caused by the city lord's mansion, they were even more surprised. The strength of the East City Lord, Qi Kong, was at the peak of the high deity stage. With such strength and cultivation, who would dare to provoke him? In the East City Lord Mansion, Qi Kong was secretly calculating while fighting with the other party. Seeing that the other party's aura was slightly chaotic and there was a sense of urgency in his moves, he had an idea and decided to beat the other party at his own game. Thus, he exchanged a few more blows with the old man. When the old man swung his palm at him, it was as if he couldn't react in time and was struck by the old man's palm. In reality, his body was controlling the power of the palm. When the old man's palm struck him, he retreated and restrained the power of the palm, but as if he couldn't fight against the old man, he staggered backwards. It was at this moment that he heard the old man immediately shout out, "Stop! Immortal binding net! Immortal binding net!" He was slightly surprised when he saw 8 black-clothed men around him. They seemed to have something in their hands that they threw at him. He wanted to avoid it, but after thinking about it, he endured it. A silver net covered him. The 8 men quickly turned around and tied him up. When his body touched the net, the spiritual aura on his body dissipated. Then, he was hit hard on the back of his neck. The 8 men quickly carried him and rushed into the night. The old man was at the back. When he saw that the guards were about to catch up, he clapped his hands with spiritual aura. An airflow attacked and repelled them a few meters away. Lord! When the city guards raised their heads again, they could no longer see their castellan and the black-clothed men. No one knew that many of the captains of the 8 Phoenix Guards had witnessed the entire scene from the shadows. When he saw Qi Kong being taken away by those people, he restrained his aura and followed them silently. Meanwhile, in the small house at the center of the lake, Du Fan and the others were drinking wine and eating small dishes. After waiting for a long time and not returning, Du Fan glanced at the night sky and said, "There are so many people here. Didn't you say you were going to call Qi Kong back for a few drinks? Why was he gone for so long? Don't tell me he was left behind." He was probably asked by Qi Kong to stay and help with the city lord's mansion. Luo Yu grinned and drank a cup of wine. He looked at Fan Lin and said, "Fan Lin, mistress is going to give birth soon, right? Have you prepared the things mistress needs to give birth? This is master's first child, and she's pregnant with twins. You have to be careful." Fan Lin ate the dishes and listened to Luo Yu's words. He said, "Don't worry. We've prepared for so long, so it will be foolproof. Moreover, Qin Xian has been learning medical skills from me for so long, and she also learned some techniques from the midwife. There will be no problems. When the little masters are born, we'll be busy. Du Fan smiled and said, when the time comes, we'll teach them all our skills. Chapter 38-40. They chatted and laughed. After waiting for a long time, they still didn't see Qi Kong return. At this moment, Leng Hua walked in from outside. Something happened at the East City Lord's residence. As Leng Hua spoke, he looked at them. Our subordinates just reported that someone entered the East City Lord's residence at night, fought with Qi Kong, and then captured him. Ah! Qi Kong was captured. Is that true? When they heard this, their faces were immediately filled with astonishment. With Qi Kang's strength, how could he be captured? This was impossible, right? It's definitely true. It said that there were 9 people, and one of them is as strong as Qi Kong. Hearing this, Du Fan smiled. We were still talking about how to call Qi Kong over for a drink. Why was he gone for so long? So something happened on his side. I guess many just happened to bump into him. Hearing their words, Guemo also said, Qi Kong is a steady and meticulous person. If Luo Yu had been captured, we would probably have to worry about him. However, since it is Qi Kong, perhaps he is playing along and wants to uncover the mastermind. When Luo Yu heard this, he immediately glared at him. How much do you look down on me? Am I that bad? I'm just a little impulsive. After all, I'm one of the leaders of the Phoenix Guards. How bad can I be? Alright, let's not alarm Master and the Yama Lord first. Let's find out who did it first. As Du Fan spoke, he looked at Leng Hua and said, later, let's contact many and find out the situation before making a decision. On this side, they were discussing. On the other side, many secretly followed them. When he saw the men in black make 7 or 8 turns and finally jump into a residence, his eyes couldn't help but flicker. The Sun residence. It's actually the Sun residence. He didn't expect it to be the Sun family. Why did they capture Qi Kong? Could it be that he knew that the 5 people who were killed last night were killed by them? Just as he was about to leave, a figure silently appeared beside him and placed a hand on his shoulder. He instinctively wanted to attack, but at that moment, he heard a voice. It's me, Ying Yi. Many people were slightly startled as they looked at the black-clothed man in front of them. After seeing him pull off the mask on his face, they couldn't help but ask in surprise, Ying Yi? Why is it you? Why are you here? Ying Yi glanced at him, then looked at the Sun family and said, I was ordered by Master to keep an eye on the Sun family. So, you also saw them bring Qi Kong here? Many people asked. Yes, I saw it. He nodded and looked at him. Not only did I see them capture Qi Kong, but I also know that Sun Wei has been summoned back. He was detained as soon as he entered the door, but they didn't do anything to him. They just locked him up. I guess they have already gotten some information about us from Sun Wei. Hearing this, many people nodded. Alright, I understand. I'll go back and tell them now and see what to do next. Alright. Ying Yi responded. He pulled the black mask over his face and rushed towards the Sun residence. Seeing this, many people quickly went back. Ying Yi was keeping an eye on this place. He had to quickly go back and tell them what to do next. Chapter 38-41. In the Sun family's underground prison, they threw Qi Kong into the black iron cage. His body was still wrapped in the immortal binding net. Because they were in a hurry to see the situation outside, they only threw him in and locked him up. They planned to interrogate him later. The 8 people from the Sun family quickly came outside. When they saw their ancestor take off the black cloth, they quickly asked, Ancestor, did the city guards catch up? Catch up? How could they possibly catch up with us? As he spoke, his old voice carried a hint of contempt. They won't be able to find this place, and no one will know that Qi Kong was captured by our Sun family. Don't worry. One of them hesitated and said, but Ancestor, I feel like tonight's matter went too smoothly. It's a bit like a dream. As the man spoke, he couldn't hide the worry in his eyes. Although Qi Kong is a peak high god, he is still a bit inexperienced compared to me. It is natural for him to lose to me. How is it too smooth? This is how it should be. Or do you think it should be normal for me to lose to him? The Sun family's ancestors' sharp eyes were filled with displeasure. I wouldn't dare, I wouldn't dare. That person was shocked and quickly replied. Where is he? Is he locked up? Asked the Sun family's ancestor. He is locked up in the dungeon, but we saw that he had the immortal binding net on him, so we didn't lock him up. Hearing this, the Sun family's ancestor frowned and said, at his level, the immortal binding net can only bind him for a while. It would be safer to lock him up with Xian iron. Seeing this, they looked at each other and one of them said, then we will lock his hands and feet with Xian iron now. Just as they were about to go to the dark room, the Sun family's patriarch quickly walked over. Ancestor. What is it? The Sun family's ancestor stopped and looked at the Sun family's patriarch. Ancestor, I just went to the dungeon. Sun Wei told me that the people with the East City Lord live in the small building at the center of the lake. As the Sun family's patriarch spoke, he looked at his ancestor and asked, now that the East City Lord is captured, what is Sun Wei going to do? Hearing this, the Sun family's ancestor frowned and thoughtfully said, a small building at the center of the lake. The small hut in the center of the lake in the South City district that was rumored to be very mysterious? That's right, that's the place. They rarely appear, so very few people have seen them. However, according to Sun Wei, he only recently found out that the people in the small building at the center of the lake were that group of people. Didn't they say they have the purple gold spirit deer? How come no one in this city has seen him before? The Sun family's patriarch suddenly asked. Sun family head shook his head, this. I really don't know. The purple gold spirit deer really exists, but I don't know where they hid it. It's also because their purple gold spirit deer didn't appear, otherwise, how could they hide their identities until now? What we know now is not their true identities. We only know what they've done in the past, and not where they came from. The Sun family's patriarch glanced at the Sun family's patriarch and continued, however, now that one of them is in our hands, it will be much easier to find out their origins from him. Then how should we deal with Sun Wei? Patriarch Sun asked. Chapter 38-42. While the Sun family was discussing, on the other side, many people had returned to the small house in the middle of the lake and told Du Fan and the others about the situation. After hearing the situation, Du Fan and the others looked at each other, and finally looked at Hui Lang and said, go and tell the Yama Lord. Ask him what to do. As for Master, if the Yama Lord wants to tell her, he will naturally tell her. Okay, then wait here for me. Hui Lang said and quickly went to the main courtyard. Xianyuan Mose in the main courtyard had already slept with Fengjiu. In the room, there was warmth, tranquility, and comfort. On the bed, the two slept on their sides. Fengjiu's back was pressed against Xianyuan Mose's chest, and her entire body seemed to be in his arms. Xianyuan Mose used one hand as a pillow for her, and the other hand gently hugged her waist. His palm was pressed against her bulging abdomen. Occasionally, when he felt her stomach gently kick, he opened his eyes and stared at his hand. He quietly raised it a bit, afraid that his hand would be too heavy and make her uncomfortable. Seeing her sleeping in his arms, her entire body leaning into his embrace, the corners of his lips curled up slightly, revealing an imperceptible smile. Just as he was enjoying this peaceful and warm moment, he heard the faint sound of a hidden sentry outside. Thus, he glanced at Fengjiu who was sleeping soundly in his arms. After thinking for a bit, he reached out and pressed her sleeping acupoint. Only then did he get up and sit on the edge of the bed. After putting on his coat, he sat in his wheelchair and went outside. "Come in." Xianyuan Mose called out, and went to sit at the table in the outer room. Hui Lang walked in quietly. Seeing his master at the table in the outer room, he walked up and said, "Master, the Sun family's people captured Qi Kong tonight. In addition, Ying Yi sent back news that Sun Wei has been detained in the Sun family, but the Sun family's people did not touch him." Hearing this, a dark light flashed through Xianyuan Mose's deep black eyes. He poured a cup of water and drank it, not saying anything. Hui Lang stood there quietly, waiting for his orders. Let Ying Yi keep an eye on him and ensure Qi Kang's safety. Also, a hint of coldness flashed through his eyes as he said, "Let the Sun family lose a few more people tonight." Hearing this, Hui Lang's face lit up with excitement and anticipation. He asked, "Does Master mean that we don't need to save Qi Kong, but rather, we want them to personally send Qi Kong out? If a few more people from the Sun family died tonight, the Sun family would definitely be in chaos." That kind of fear that everyone was afraid of was definitely the most ruthless way to torment a person's heart. It was comparable to death by 1,000 cuts. "Go and do it," he said, putting down the cup. "Yes." Hui Lang answered excitedly. He turned around and walked out quickly. In front of them, Du Fan and the others' eyes flashed when they heard Hui Lang's words. Du Fan gently fanned himself with the fan in his hand. His eyes flashed with a smile as he said, "As expected of the Yama Lord. This is a psychological attack. It's even more terrifying than killing them directly. Then what are we waiting for? Let's go. We'll pick a few more people tonight." Luo Yu rubbed his fists. He could not wait any longer. "I want to go too," many people said as they walked out. "I'll go too." Hui Lang grinned and said to Wei Feng and the others, "You guys can stay here. It's our turn tonight." Wei Feng smiled and said, "All right, then you guys be careful. You guys stay at home and guard well." Gu Mo looked at Ling Hua and the others and said, "Yes, you guys be careful." Chapter 38-43. At the same time, the people from the Sun family came to the secret room. Because they didn't let the other party know their identities, they came in with black scarves covering their faces. However, what they didn't expect was that the person who had been knocked unconscious had already woken up. Some of the people following behind couldn't help but pull at the black scarves on their faces, afraid that their faces would be seen. The Sun family's ancestor, who was walking in front, stood in front of the mysterious iron prison with his hands behind his back. He looked at the tall figure sitting in the corner and his eyes couldn't help but flash. "The East City Lord is so bold. You can still be so calm even in my place. Aren't you afraid that I'll kill you?" The old voice was filled with pressure and killing intent. Although the person was old, his voice was full of energy. Qi Kong, who was sitting in the corner, looked at the old man and sneered, "What's there to be afraid of? Presumptuous." The old man shouted angrily. He flicked his sleeve and a gust of wind came out of his sleeve and swept toward Qi Kong. Qi Kong only felt a gust of wind hit him and his face was slapped hard. Half of his face was in pain and a trace of blood flowed out from the corner of his mouth. He spat out a mouthful of blood on the ground. His sharp eyes were cold and his deep voice contained bloodthirsty killing intent. "I, Qi Kong, will remember this slap." It was just a simple sentence, but it inexplicably made the hearts of the people behind the Sun family's ancestor tremble. They faintly felt a sense of fear. They looked at Qi Kong, who was sitting against the wall without the slightest fear. Instead, he dared to threaten them. This boldness, this power, this temperament already made them feel some regret in their hearts. If they had directly killed Sun Wei and didn't investigate who did this, would it have been better for their family? However, there was no turning back. Even if they felt a trace of regret in their hearts, there was no turning back. The Sun family's ancestor's heart was surging with anger. His hands behind his back were already tightly clenched into fists. If it was someone else, how could they still be so calm and composed? However, even though he was in the dungeon and was threatened by his words, he still didn't show a trace of fear or panic. Instead, he revealed a sense of confidence and contempt. For some reason, it made him feel as if this profound iron prison could not hold him. This made him feel anxious. Handcuff him. Use torture. The old voice was filled with ruthlessness. He stared at the person sitting against the wall. He did not believe that there was someone who was not afraid of death. Hearing this, the people behind him couldn't help but look at each other. They were a little hesitant, so they didn't go forward. Instead, they said, "Ancestor, it's already late. Why don't we lock him up until tomorrow?" When the Sun family's patriarch heard this, he also said, "Dealing with such a stubborn person, he won't be able to open his mouth for a while. Why don't old ancestor go and rest? We'll have plenty of time to deal with him tomorrow." When the Sun family's ancestor heard this, he stared at Qi Kong with a vicious gaze and said, "I want to see how hard his bones are. Cuff him up." "Didn't you hear me?" he shouted sternly. Everyone looked at each other and then at the Sun family's patriarch. When the Sun family's patriarch saw this, he gave them a look and told them to cuff him up. However, just as they were about to step out, someone rushed in from outside. Chapter 38-44. Hearing this, the Sun family's patriarch and the others' expressions changed. What happened? How did it catch fire? I don't know what happened, but it suddenly caught fire. I've already asked the people in the residence to put out the fire, the person said anxiously. Do you think I'm so easy to catch? Qi Kong, who was sitting in the corner, looked at them. In the dim light of the dungeon, his eyes were unfathomable. He looked at the Sun family's patriarch and sneered. It's a pity that the Sun family has such a patriarch with no foresight. The decline of the family is just around the corner. If the Sun family's patriarch and the others were shocked and they heard that there was a fire outside, then when they heard this, it could be said that a wave of fear rose from the soles of their feet and rushed to their hearts. It rushed to the top of their heads, causing their vision to darken. How do you know we're from the Sun family?" that a masked man asked in a trembling voice. As soon as he asked this, the Sun family's patriarch's blade-like gaze swept over him. He was so scared that he didn't dare to speak again. The High Firmament Celestial Sect's Sun Peak Master, Sun Wei, is from the Sun family. Recently, they have been secretly stirring up trouble, and 5 people from the Sun family have died. In the entire Spirit Celestial City, besides the Sun family, who dares to enter the East City Lord's residence at night? Qi Kong looked at them and said, "I didn't expect it to be the Sun family. After all, I gave you a way out. I didn't expect you to walk down the path of death. It's a pity." The Sun family's patriarch's lips trembled and he asked, This fire was set by your people?" Qi Kong didn't speak and just sat there quietly. The Sun family's patriarch gloomily stared at Qi Kong for a while, then he flicked his sleeves and turned to walk out. "Watch him." With that, he strode out. The Sun family's patriarch and the others looked at each other and quickly left. They told the guards to stay behind and rushed to the place where the fire was. With the help of the fire, it could be said that most of the Sun family's residence was lit up in the night. However, the people were also in a mess. Cries of surprise and the sound of people running to put out the fire could be heard from time to time. What they didn't know was that in a place where the light couldn't reach, several figures were staring at the people who were putting out the fire. When they saw the people who were still wearing night clothes rushing over, they looked at each other. Each of you pick one person, try to avoid the Sun's son's patriarch and the Sun family's patriarch. Grey Wolf and the others nodded, and then spread out, quietly following and waiting for an opportunity to move. Because the fire was huge, everyone helped to put out the fire. Those with water attributes used their own attributes to put out the fire, while those with earth attributes used sand to put out the fire. Some went to carry water to put out the fire. In the midst of the chaos, Grey Wolf quietly grabbed a member of the Sun family who was dressed in night clothes. He covered his mouth with one hand and dragged him to a dark place. With a click, he killed him directly. Until he died, that person didn't see who killed him. His eyes were wide open in fear until his body stiffened and was thrown on the ground. On the other side, Du Fan and the others each picked one person to kill. With their strength, it was easy to deal with the Sun family. Moreover, they were in the dark while the other party was in the light. It was even easier to kill them. You're tuning into the Han Lee's Wuxia Adventures YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.